Gato, we are live. We're gonna get everything all set up. It's gonna take a minute. Sorry, I was
All
on
good,
another
man.
on another stream. Earnings report is out, or at least it's across the ticker tape. So I'm just looking to find it. I cannot find it as of yet. So hopefully, there we go. Full year earnings 121. Oh wow, okay, they ended up being pretty good. Let me share my screen. Vince said he might be a little bit late, but appreciate Scott being here. Always a good day to hang out with Scotto. Let me know if I'm showing everything okay here. So
Looks
Rocket
good,
Lab
yeah.
full year, fourth quarter, post record revenue representing 26% quarter over quarter, 78% annual, 121. So this is about what I was expecting. About what is this supposed to be? 125, 132 is better than I was expecting. In terms of revenue, were you expecting 132? What were you expecting, Scotto?
I was right in the middle of guidance at 130, so a slight beat. Yeah, it's great to see.
Perfect. Yeah, I was. I personally was thinking when we were entering 3Q. We'll get through the rest of it. We have 45 minutes till the call starts, so we got some time to digest this, and hopefully the presentation comes out here in the next 10 minutes or so. But I was thinking that when we had the 3Q call, they were kind of guiding from 125 to 135, and they were still ambitious about 7 or 8 launches. We only got the 6. So my thought process was, when they were coming up with that guidance, were they hedging and saying 125 is 6 launches, 135 is 7 launches, or what? So that was kind of why I went to the lower end, because we only got the 6 launches instead of the 8 that they were ambitious to get. So,
Maddie, check the investor page. The full report is out now.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of these crazy refresh. Let me zoom out. Come on now. Dope. Oh, that's a different format. All right. Have you seen anything yet?
I shouldn't be looking at chat right now. Yeah, I won't spoil anything, but yeah,
you won't spoil anything.
A couple tidbits for sure.
382 revenue increase. Okay, cool. A year of execution. 450 million in contract value.
Maddie, check your screen. I'm just seeing like a presentation screen. I'm not seeing the actual report.
Oh no. Okay. Good call. Where is it? Is this it? Let me know if this is it. Can you see it?
There she is. Yeah.
All right. It was being weird. Okay, there we go. So, okay, 16 launches, annual record, 100% mission success. I know you keep track of that, Scotto, so good there. Look at that beautiful blue fire for Archimedes. A world first, 2 launches in 24 hours in 2 hemispheres. Okay, that makes sense. I was like, a world first, 24 hours. I was like, I feel like SpaceX, but no, in 2 different hemispheres. That is a world's first. We got the Escapade out, and then first successful return for Varda. So, yes. Okay. First launch planned for 25, 20% Electron and Haste, 40 spacecraft in production. That's not really new from 3Q, but still there. But this last tranche, working toward delivering our own applications from space, the Constellation, introducing a low-cost, high-volume Rocket Lab Constellation spacecraft. So I'm wondering if that's different than the family that they already have. Any thoughts on this one, Scotto?
Yeah, just to put on a tinfoil hat, I'm not sure if you saw, but yesterday I was just kind of, touching up the spreadsheets, and I happened to notice that there was a new 5 NMS reaction wheel posted, or updated on the site. And there's no announcement for it. There's nothing like that, but this is built off of a lot of the heritage of what we've seen with their large wheel, the high volume wheel, the 12 NMS wheel. And I'm wondering if maybe that kind of points us in the direction of what Rocket Lab is building here. So if memory serves, that new 5 NMS wheel, that's 250 to 600 kilogram range, which is, kind of standard. Technically you could squeak that on an Electron if you wanted to, but also, it's, we can assume it to be Neutron ready as well. So it's been a couple of new pieces of the puzzle over the past year, a new satellite dispenser as well. So I'm wondering if maybe these kind of pointing us in a particular direction.
Yeah, stock not acting favorably. Quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
My thought process as I was leaving the chat with Amit, my thought process was that we were going to have algorithms perform unfavorably, meaning go down, based off of what we actually talk or what the highlighted numbers are that come across the Bloomberg terminal. We're getting revenue, EBITDA, etc. My thought process is we haven't even dove into it yet. The two Neutron contracts, we'll obviously get some color on that, I assume, as we go through this. There's a lot of details I'm sure that we're going to get about the Constellation, the thing that you just mentioned. Do you think that during the conference call, this down 10% after hours, 11%, 16, 18% on the day, do you think that that's going to reverse or flatten out from where we are?
I mean, I really don't know. Like, it's perplexing to me. Like, who's even moving right now? Who's buying or selling? I mean, like, who's had time to even digest this? We're on like what, page 5? Like, who's buying or selling?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
my thought is like it's the algorithms looking at the ticker, coming across the Bloomberg terminal that are just automatically, buying and selling versus actually digesting exactly what you stated.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it does stay at this like what, negative 10%. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be taking out loans to buy that dip tomorrow.
I'm gonna mortgage some of the houses here. So this shouldn't be too surprising. Small launch. I was writing about this in my Seeking Alpha article, which I was hoping going to come out this morning. Likely it'll come out tomorrow. But 100% mission success, 16, so 60% increase year over year. 2 missions in 24 hours. They stated that on the 2024 headline. This is what I'm mostly looking for. Emerge as a market leader for hypersonic tests. Multiple successful HASTE missions, newly extended Pentagon program. One of only 3 U.S. launch providers to get into orbit in 2025. I think that's important because a lot of people are like, oh, but other small launches out there. And, specifically with the Bleecker Street Report, they're like, talking about how Rocket Lab is misguiding. And it's like, these guys are the only ones that have actually put stuff into space. Like all these other people that you're talking about are behind, or they've launched maybe less than a handful of times, or maybe even haven't even launched once. I think it's important to denote, these guys are the only ones that have launched. 1 out of 3 that have launched in 2025. I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Anything on this one?
No, I'm actually hung up on the spacecraft thing from that last slide. It mentioned 16 spacecraft in space scheduled for launch or expected to have completed their missions by end of Q3 2025. Like, does that mean that MDA is slightly pushed back? Because I thought that was supposed to launch in the first half of 2025.
Good point. You're saying 18 versus 16? Is that what you're saying?
I'm seeing 16, but there's oh man, there was 17, right? Or am I getting SDN and MDA backwards? I'll check in on that.
Shout out to the billion people that are here, man. We got 205 on Scotto's channel. Congrats. 150 on Ghostman, Vince's Bullish's channel. And then 340 on mine. I appreciate you guys so much. It's always a pleasure to be able to hang out with you guys. Sorry we're not looking at the chat. We're just obviously hung into digesting these numbers. It's my favorite conviction play for 2025 and probably beyond. Honestly, it's my biggest position that I have in the portfolio. So always love. So apologies if you feel like I'm ignoring you. I am not. Trust me. I hope you stick around and be able to digest not only before we get to the call itself, but hopefully after the call we can digest that as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm also seeing in the chat, Matt, there is a mention of Neutron in the second half of 2025, but I don't know if that's really news. Like when they said middle of 2025, I assume they're not meaning, April, right? Or May for that. So I like from the moment they announced that, I've always kind of assumed that to be second half of 2025 and got some pushback, but I mean, they're not going to launch on.
I've always assumed it as net June 30th or net July 1. So net meaning no earlier than then. Mm-hmm. Which is actually something I pointed out in my article as well, which is like Bleecker Street was just like, they're misguiding investors saying it's going to launch, like guaranteed launch in mid-year. And I'm like, they say net all the time with like every single one of these launches. They say no earlier than, right? Like, so that it has to be after that date. So I was never, like you stated, hoping for like April launch or something like that to kind of come out of nowhere.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
This one, not too crazy, but I think it's important to denote the partnerships, right? IQPS, Kinesis, 8 dedicated Electron missions through IQPS. So hopefully that adds to the backlog. I'm very curious to get to the backlog slide, as I know you are.
Oh, yeah.
Hypersonic, 2 haste missions in 21 days, 5 haste missions. We saw the Kratos, which I'm curious if they're going to give us an idea, because a lot of the stuff that happened was like early January, if you remember. So like the second Neutron contract, the Kratos contracts. So unfortunately, in the backlog slide, we're not going to see that, but I'm curious if they're going to mention it, at least on the call, maybe.
Sorry, am I misreading this? Can you go back up to the Kinesis IQPS slide?
Yeah.
In Q1 2025 alone, we've announced 8 dedicated Electron missions signed with IQPS through 2025 and 2026. It was 4.
Was it
4? Right? Because it was the 4 confidential Constellation customer, I think is the way it was phrased during Q3. And then more recently, it was like kind of re-announced, but there's 4. I'm sure of it.
IQPS multi-launch contract. A Japan-based includes 3 dedicated and 25, and with a 4th. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so I guess we just got 4. Okay, well, announced. And announced is a strange way to put it too. I don't know. I was looking. There's like a document that I'll share with you later, but there's like translated, and long story short, they have like a large manifest, and Rocket Lab only seems to have like 4, maybe now 8 of those launches, but there's a ton more that are coming down the line. So maybe this is a large expansion to that contract.
That'd be good.
And especially because they're saying like in 20, I don't know. I'm getting caught up in the weeds here, but that's news.
But that you need a kit, you know what I mean? Like it's, if we only get on screen like this 4 times a year. It's unless there's an investor day, or we get a fortunate bone thrown at us and have the opportunity to talk to Peter and Adam firsthand. But TBD on that one for this quarter at least. But no, I'm definitely curious if they're going to bring that up maybe after, or at least address it. The year of Neutron. Let's just see. Thousands of Constellation satellites need a ride to orbit in the next 5 years. Demand for national security launch continues to grow. There are only a few launch options. Neutron will unblock the bottleneck, and we continue to do it on a rapid timeline. Critical to us launching and operating our own future satellite constellation, and it is debut launch scheduled for the second half. Look at that! I like this looks like it's velvety. This looks like red. I like that. I don't know if that's real or not, or if that's the I don't remember ever seeing the inside of the fairings, but
there was one other, and if I'm not mistaken, it looked like a OneWeb payload. This payload here, chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but this payload here, this looks to be something different. So
yeah,
maybe that's a tease at the upcoming customer.
Yeah, it looks too big. Kind of going back to what you were saying, it looks kind of too big to be. It doesn't look like it's a constellation. Interesting.
To take that one step further and really put on a tinfoil hat, Matt, you might remember, I think it was like 2 Rocket Lab weeklies ago, where I mentioned that there was a rumor going around about some very large reaction wheel being developed. So maybe what we're seeing here is the GEO satellite, one of those big boys.
Yeah. Interesting. Stock's still down 13%, but we are retracing. So we did dip down into 1695 is what I'm seeing here on the day. And now we just turned back around to 1695. So we're hanging out about 15% down after hours. I'm excited personally. I would love for it to open. I have some stuff I actually wouldn't mind selling and getting into this. I actually sold some stuff today, and anticipation is not a lot, $10,000, but every $10,000 can eventually be $100,000. So
for sure.
Interesting. Okay, let's get back to this. So Neutron, we know. So Neutron launch site nearing completion. Look at these. These are good pictures. Let's scheduled to be open in the second quarter. That's cool. Those are some big tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hungry Hippo comes alive. I remember when this thing used to be, was it supposed to be 4 or 3?
Originally it was 4. Yeah.
Yeah. This is much cleaner.
Is that Peter back on the right?
I think so.
I hope so.
It is, dude. Look at him.
Sweet.
That's a good scale.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the fairings, dude. That's just the top. This is going to be a big boy.
Mm-hmm.
You like, I don't know. Whenever I look at Falcon 9 and stuff, it always looks like it's way smaller, and then you see people next to it, and you're like, holy shit, these things are pretty big. I'm curious. Let's look into these fairings a little bit. This is kind of, that's pretty cool.
I'm seeing in the chat a question: why is Intuitive down? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Rocket Lab drags all these space stocks down. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you see people liquidating out of, like, literally name it, into Rocket Lab if we're going to see this big of a drop off tomorrow. So
yeah, I mean, Intuitive, that's an interesting one. They just launched their second lander yesterday on SpaceX, so I actually bought some contracts just as a gamble, guys. You know, when somebody does some of those things, and I don't mean gamble as in like Intuitive's not a great investment. I mean gamble because I don't know if it's going to go up or down, right? Versus Rocket Lab, that's not a gamble; it's an investment, right? I'm buying that for the long term. I'm buying shares generally. Unless sometimes I buy deep in the money leaps, but most of the time I'm buying shares. But the Intuitive Machines one's very short dated until April, hoping for a positive news on the lunar lander within the next 20 days or so.
Mm-hmm.
Flight hardware and test, 100% of Neutron flight hardware in production. That's good to know. Once qualification is complete, next step is a full integration. That's what I want to see, man. Structure is being produced in parallel for the second launch. That's also what I want to see, because remember, people were giving Rocket Lab a lot of crap about why it's taking so long to get the Archimedes engine out. And I thought the reason being was because, you remember this pretty well, I'm assuming, is they were designing the assembly line before they actually designed finished the engine. So they were like, they took a gamble in actually making sure that the system and the assembly line was completed. I assume it's almost the same for this. Like, they didn't just like throw together a haphazard design. Like, I think that they threw together something that they feel very confident in. And yes, there's going to be tweaks, right? Just like how they removed 200 pounds worth of steel from Archimedes. But the fact that they're working on the second vehicle makes me ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand how there could be, you know, knowing what they know and how well they've done and be able to put things into space, and knowing how far we've come in terms of engineering and putting things into space, I find it hard to believe that whatever they make wouldn't be able to make it into space, at least the first or second rocket. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's always integration and loose bolts and stuff like that could always, unfortunately, end up in a demise of a rocket. But the overall design, I don't think we know enough now where it's unlikely that it's going to be flawed.
Definitely, yeah.
Look at that, dude. I just love, like, this logo is so cool. Is this what is this? This isn't the extended cone. The cone is not that big. What is this?
I don't know. I don't know. Chat, what do you think? Because I would assume the same thing, but like, is the one on the right just not?
Yeah,
I don't know. Curtis is saying vacuum bell. So is that the bell for the second stage, I guess?
Because I was thinking, I was like, the rocket's big, but I don't know if it could fit 9 of these, you know what I mean, in a circle underneath the Neutron rocket. But if this is for the second stage, that makes sense. Let me see if it goes back to. Sorry, guys, that would make sense, because it probably is if you put the bell on the back of this second stage, that might make a little more sense. Okay. Is there anything you want to skip to? I feel like just going slide by slide, I'm going to I don't want to ignore people in the chat or anything like that.
How are we doing for time? No, we got like 25 minutes, so
Okay.
I think we're doing fine. Yeah.
Second Archimedes engine test cell underway. Completion expected this quarter. Hell yes. Oh, we got the platform, dude.
Oh, beauty.
Return on investment is the sickest name. I love that.
That's the name?
That's the name, dude. I love that. Can that please just be written on like huge letters on the side? Return on investment.
That's awesome.
That is really cool. Let's check out the rendition. First Neutron plans. Yeah, the water recovery, right? Man, no recovery. I hope that Peter gets so rich that he pulls a Jeff Bezos and gets like a massive return vessel to capture the one of the first engines, kind of like how Jeff Bezos got one of the Apollo engines. If you remember,
I think it was a Saturn V. I think
Saturn V. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. I hope Peter just like gets massively into, instead of just going into space, he's like, you know what? I've hit $20 billion of wealth. Let me start going into the ocean. Okay, so this is saying 2026. So I'm still kind of curious if, so we're at least planning for a first launch in the second half 25. I don't know when they're planning the second launch, but it looks like this is obviously either for a second or third launch to be able to capture. Here we go. This is a good slide. Okay, so blue means currently underway. So basically, flight software for stage 1, 2, the qualification of the Hungry Hippo, structure qualification. I was wondering if they had done this or not. Looks like obviously not. Stage 1, structure qualification, flight mechanisms, engine, regulatory approvals underway, launch complex 3, and then I guess scheduled is once all these things are completed, then you can do the vehicle integration, which will be really fun. Static 2, stage 2 fire, stage 1 fire, wet rehearsal, and then launch. Yeah, it's a lot of milestones, guys. Like going into the calls, looking at my watch, I was looking at the date. I was like, it's end of February. We got 4 months till mid 25. It's a lot. It's a lot. I was hoping that maybe like my best dream scenario was we would enter this call and they're like, oh, by the way, here's all the videos for like stage 1 flight, static test and qualifications and all that. And we only have integration and wet dress rehearsal. But yeah, I knew that was a pipe dream.
Yeah.
All right, space systems. Yes. For those of you guys that do not know, we are currently on our way. Actually, we're circling. We're not even on our way to the moon. We are literally circling the surface of the moon. There's a really cool X video that the investor relations guy from Firefly put up. But then also the Varda space mission, they've entered one time this week. They've entered previously in the third quarter, I believe. The second one was launched, the second Winnebago was launched by SpaceX, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. Any thoughts on this one, Scotto?
Sorry, I'm kind of I'm trying to catch up on that bingo post.
You're good.
But yeah, I think that second Varda is just re-entering, right? I think I saw Varda post a streak in the sky, and I assume that's good news.
Yeah. Good news. I did see that they posted a news report about Victus Hayes. So they did get, it looks like at least the initial qualifications for that. Prime contractor for Tranche 2 SDA. We knew that. Preliminary design review complete. So 18 spacecraft on track for delivery. So I'm curious. Let me see. What did they state about the Victus Hayes? It was a headline that they just released the other day, 3 days ago.
Oh, Chad, help me out here. It was like a confirmation of the game plan, so to speak.
Let's just see. Yeah, something like that. The CDR milestone.
Design review there. Yeah.
Design review. Concept design review or something.
Thank you, Jacob.
All right. So the different family in 2021, Locksat, Varda, Lightning, Escapade. Oh, what's next? The Flatellite.
Ooh.
Is this
very cool?
Is this Rocket Labs Constellation, or is this other people's? Low-cost satellite design for mass manufacture tailored for large constellations. Scalable, resilient, high power, secure, low latency, high-speed connectivity. More than just a new product to serve our customers' needs, ever-evolving needs. A bold strategic move toward being a truly end-to-end operating our own concept. So this is the potential concept for. Am I interpreting that right? Are you seeing the same? Are you getting the same?
Like, yeah, this is like what Starlink satellites look like. Someone in the someone smarter than me here, like,
That's it.
Maybe used for the own and others.
Damn it! You can't just put like one slide, give us 3 pictures, and like give us some really general stuff. Like,
is this like a huge, like indicator of what the constellation is going to look like?
I'm trying to interpret it because I'm like, at first I'm interpreting this as like, hey, we can create your constellations for you if you want it. But at the same time, I'm reading this right-hand text box as this is what our constellation is going to look like. Like a bold strategic move toward truly being an end-to-end space company operating our own constellation, delivering services from space. But then it's at the same box as it's a new product to serve our customers' ever-evolving needs. So it's like, is it for the customers? Is it for building our own constellation? Is it both? It feels like both.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm willing to bet this is like a huge indicator of what Rocket Lab's constellation is going to be. And I'm getting oh, sorry, who was that? I think Simon in the chat. He's saying that it's like if the satellite's really flat, you can go a lot lower and have less drag to come down. So if you're familiar with what Redwire is doing, or like a lot of companies now with this very low Earth orbit stuff, it's like, if you get less drag, the satellites can stay up longer in theory.
Huh.
And of course, I mean, you see on the right-hand side there that Neutron is just jammed with what, 25 separate satellites compared to what otherwise would be a lot less, right? So very cool.
I'm counting 16.
16K.
But that's off this flat stuff, so I don't know. If one flat thing is 16. Okay. All right. The fun stuff for me, revenues. Well, I like it all, but I like the revenue stuff too. This is a cool little slightly new design. So review of gross margins. So 23% quarter on quarter. 105 million is where we were in 3Q. 132. Wow, I still can't believe we got to 132 in the fourth quarter. 120 year over year. I was expecting 108 year over year. So from 60 million to 132. So it beats my expectations. 78% year over year from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. And then from 27.5 to 132 million since the NASDAQ debut in 2021. Non-GAAP still doing okay. Oh, this is 2023. Okay, good. I was going to say, it went down a little bit, but no, 32% non-GAAP, pretty good. And then GAAP closing in on 30. So we're getting there. Yeah, I remember seeing this low 30s. So now we're getting on a non-GAAP gross margin, starting to get into the mid 30s, which is very positive. Let's see if there's anything. Full year 2024 increase about 78.3 or 191.6 million, driven by launches increase from 10 to 16, as well as our growth in space systems, primarily driven by MDA, SDA satellite manufacturing contracts and component business. Q4 revenue increase of 26 quarter over quarter, driven primarily by going from 3 launches to 5, and as well as our growth in our space systems business, primarily revenue recognition from the SDA. And then gross margin increases driven primarily by increase in launch cadence, partially offset by unfavorable mix shift in our space systems business. Interesting. I guess hardware maybe not have as much gross margins as launch. I don't know. Q4 gross margins increase in launch cadence. That makes sense. Improved with our satellite manufacturing business. So I guess the MDA contracts are more favorable than maybe the space components business. Backlog, that I guess makes sense. I was hoping to get to 1.1 at least. But 1.06 billion as of Q4, but this, keep in mind, doesn't include Kratos contract. This does not include the NASA VADR contract. Excuse me. Large share government contract, largely driven by STA and continued haste bookings, sequential rebalancing, and healthy launch bookings. Neutron multi-launch deal announced. So that's the first Neutron deal with the confidential customer, and then large revenue recognition from space systems. 50% of our backlog to be recognized within 12 months, and 50 would be beyond 12 months. Jesus.
Beautiful. It's going to be a great year.
Yeah, good year in revenue. Not so good on backlog eating. We need to step our game up.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully 1Q changes. I think 1Q will be, with the Kratos contract and stuff, I think it'll hopefully be I don't know. But now you're starting to, that's the thing, is like now you're going to start ramping up to like 135, 150 million a quarter. Like you really got to get yeah, it's something I've been concerned about a little bit by the backlog, but so far it hasn't bitten us. We've been able to maintain, even though we're increasing revenue, we've been able to maintain $1 billion. So OpEx, let's see, GAAP from non-GAAP. So R&D increased slightly from 37 to 48. On GAAP, and then 33 to 46 on non-GAAP. Let's see. GAAP SG&A increased due to outside services related to legal, IT infrastructure, cybersecurity, etc. Modest increase in staff. Non-GAAP, due to above reasons as well. GAAP R&D expense due to step up in Neutron development spending, particularly Archimedes testing, along with modest increase in staff. And then same thing with non-GAAP. So R&D is obviously our Archimedes and Neutron. That makes sense. And then SG&A, I guess, is just staff. Okay. That's year on year, quarter on quarter. So it's pretty much, it's largely flat quarter over quarter. Slight increase, it looks like, in both R&D and SG&A. But overall, nothing too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's probably what we'll see for the next 2 to 4 quarters, I bet.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I think, yeah, once I'm hoping, I know some of this R&D will then just go to normal, like, cost of goods sell. I think it's just going to go to COGS, a lot of this R&D, because right now you can't, unless you're selling it, I don't think you can really use it as COGS. So I think right now it's just R&D spend. But eventually I anticipate that this, like, building of Neutron and Archimedes and all that stuff, eventually there'll still be R&D, I'm sure, but the 20 to 30 million or maybe even 35 million that they're spending on Neutron a quarter, I anticipate will eventually go to COGS.
And once we get that first Neutron to the pad, I think it was Peter, maybe it was Adam, but they mentioned that that's pretty much 80% of the entire, like, R&D spend and architecture spend is already going to be kind of established. So, I mean, what is, if 300 to 350 million is 80%, what's the full budget? Like 400-ish, give or take? Call it 420 for fun.
So definitely has increased a bit. Okay, so actual EBITDA shrinking in terms of losses.
Mm-hmm.
484 million in cash. That's good. I think that's down from 509 or 507 in the 3Q. So that's where that 23 comes in here. Let's see. Cash consumed from purchasing properties of 10.5 million. Increase as we accelerate Neutron. Cash consumed by operations of 28.5 million, driven by satellite manufacturing and milestone payment collection. And then improved 7 million sequentially due to a significant increase in revenue. So getting to a place where gross profit is starting to offset SG&A and R&D.
It's a pretty decent beat on adjusted EBITDA too. Like they were guiding for 27 to 29 million loss, and they landed 23. So
23 was a lot less than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say a lot, but it's less than I was expecting for sure. I was expecting to see a 30 print.
Mm.
And that's purchase of property, equipment, and software up 21 million. That's, I guess, the Neutron infrastructure investments. And then just normal. So we're on cash flow. Look at this. So this goes back to what I think Adam was saying is like pretty much if you were to look at the underlying business, not Neutron, but you're getting close to being in the green.
Yeah,
you're talking about cash in, cash out. So all you basically need is Neutron to start giving you a little bit of love, and you start taking in payments and recognizing that revenue. I'm sure you'll be in the green pretty quick.
Just checking in on Rocket Lab stock. It looks like the dip is being bought a little bit, or just above 18 now, 18.25. So,
all right, we got, I guess, one or two more slides. 1Q revenue outlook. So dip 117 to 123. So it's about a 10% dip from where we ended up. Maybe closer to 10 to 15% dip. Expect year-on-year increases in space systems and launch revenue. I guess this will be up from 1Q, but down from 4Q. Mm-hmm. So year over year, an increase, but quarter over quarter sequentially down. Gross margins 25 to 27. That's not crazy. So maybe slightly lower, probably due to the lower revenue recognition. Gross margins shrink a little bit. And then GAAP OpEx up probably due to getting prepped for, what was the OpEx expenses? What were they? 46 plus 30, so about low 70s. Okay. So it's about in line with what it has been, I guess. Maybe slightly more, but not drastic. And then EBITDA loss of 33 to 35. And then 458 million shares plus Peter's 51 million. In preferred. What is this one? Consistent with previously how we defined EBITDA. Stock-based compensation, transaction cost, depreciation, amortization, foreign exchange. Yeah, that's nothing crazy. And then any key. I remember this key bank last year was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other ones that you want to look at? We got 5 minutes to go. Has Hot Vince joined us?
No, I was just checking. Still nothing yet.
It's early over there. Mm-hmm. Well, late rather, I guess. Interesting. This one's still. I'm not trying. I don't want to be super critical. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're going to give a lot more verbal details in this. But I'm pretty underwhelmed by that slide.
Which one in particular? The Flatellite one? Yeah. I'm sure that we're going to get a bunch more information on the call. At least I hope so.
I hope so. Let's see on CNBC if I can find anything over the last hour about Rocket Lab. They got Tom Siebel, Snowflake CEO, Snowflake revenue. Closing overtime, commercials, Spurs, synopsis. I'm not seeing anything. All right, let's check it with the chat. I'm not seeing anything. Let's see. I'm going to go up a little bit. Will RKLB have to dilute? I don't think so at the moment. And based off what Adam has said, he doesn't feel like it at the moment. And he just said that at the City Technology Conference, or Industrial Conference, rather.
Yeah, I think he guided for like needing to like raise capital around the 300 million mark, which should put us around middle of the year, give or take. But kind of have to look a bit closer in terms of cash burn in Q4.
Right. Let me just put this over here for quick. Should be an interesting call. Launch of space systems. Let's see. Anything that you want to highlight in the comments?
You know what? I actually just finished putting something together. The Electron revenue per launch, I think, is an all-time high. Just double checking. Confirmed. Yeah. So we hit 8.47 million per launch on average. And, granted, that was a little offset to the downside with some contracts that were signed, I think, in 2021. Like Kinesis kind of sticks out. And then obviously brought upwards as well from those 2 HASTE launches within the quarter, but still record-breaking average Electron revenue this quarter, which is good to see. And then in terms of the average cost for Electron, not quite as hot, but I mean, that's kind of brought up as well for those 2 HASTE launches. On average, every time we launch with a Wallops, it's an extra $1 million to get off the ground. So it makes sense that it would kind of be brought to the upside. So Q3 by comparison is about 5 million per Electron, and Q4 is right around 6 million per Electron. So good to see overall.
I think it's interesting. I'm curious to think why somebody says there's no new customers for Neutron. We've within the last 3 to 4 months signed 2 different customers, but I'm curious to see if they've alluded to within the Q&A section, or maybe during the Neutron side, if they've had more interest or less over the past few months. Maybe people are still just waiting for them to launch or get closer to launch. But I wouldn't be surprised that once we get a wet integrated test, probably closer within the next 3 to 4 months, that I'd be surprised to see if we don't get a 3rd and 4th contract or customer rather.
Honestly, I'm kind of like, I don't know if relieved is the word, but like we kind of talked about previous, I don't think they should rush into like filling up their 26, 27, even 28 at this point. Like just kind of wait, there's no hurry. And I mean, honestly, by this time next year, maybe the Neutron is worth 65, even 65 million. There's no sense leaving money on the table still.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to call that out. I appreciate you bringing it up because we're about 1 minute from the call starting, guys. Bleecker Street basically stated that why would you go with a Neutron vessel over a Falcon 9 if Falcon 9 can lift more? And then I was looking at some evidence online that shows that you're only on average for non-Starlink, or basically customers of SpaceX, not SpaceX themselves or Starlink, only launching about 3,200 kilograms. So in that respect, if you're only launching 3,200 kilograms, it's way in the realm of being able to be launched by Neutron. And so that $55 million price target rather than the 70 actually shows up at $16,000 a kilogram versus 21,000 if you kind of use that average 3,200 kilogram launch need. And so in that respect, it's 20% cheaper. So of course, if you have a capable vehicle, reusable, if that's important for your kind of company to lower your carbon footprint, etc., then why wouldn't you go with Neutron, right? Especially if you could have both. So to me, I think you're going to see a lot of people, just for the fact that they need consistent competition, probably end up with saying, hey, we have to split our contracts into multiple people just because we need to ensure that our product consistently gets to space no matter how it does. So, all right, we're starting.
Good evening, and thank you for standing by. My name is Kelvin, and I'll be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to Rocket Lab's fourth quarter 2024 financial results update and conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star followed by the number one on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key or star two. Thank you. I would now like to turn the call over to Muriel Baker, Senior Communications Manager. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to today's conference call to discuss Rocket Lab's full year and fourth quarter 2024 financial results. Now, before we begin the call, I'd like to remind you that our remarks may contain forward-looking statements that relate to the future performance of the company, and these statements are intended to qualify for the safe harbor protection from liability established by the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act. Any such statements are not guarantees of future performance, and factors that could influence our results are highlighted in today's press release, and others are contained in our filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Such statements are based upon information available to the company as of the date hereof and are subject to change for future developments. Except as required by law, the company does not undertake any obligation to update these statements. Now, our remarks and press release today also contain non-GAAP financial measures within the meaning of Regulation G enacted by the SEC. Included in such release and our supplemental materials are reconciliations of these historical non-GAAP financial measures to the comparable financial measures calculated in accordance with GAAP. This call is also being webcast with a supporting presentation, and a replay and copy of the presentation will be available on our website. Our speakers today are Rocket Lab Founder and Chief Executive Officer Sir Peter Beck, as well as Chief Financial Officer Adam Spice. They'll be discussing key business developments and highlights, including updates on our launch and space systems programs. We will discuss financial highlights and outlook before we finish by taking questions. So with that, let me turn the call over to Sir Peter.
Thanks, Muriel, and thanks for everybody joining us today. Look, 2024 was our biggest revenue year ever, and I'm proud to share that we delivered very strong results for Q4 2024. And indeed, for the full year, we achieved our highest annual revenue figure to date of $436 million. That's more than a 78% increase on previous year's revenue, demonstrating that our strategy of delivering end-to-end space services is paying off and delivering significant growth. From Q3 to Q4 last year, we saw growth of more than 26%, and year-on-year Q4 growth was 121%. Something you'll hear me say often at Rocket Lab is we do what we say we're going to do, and in this case, that's delivering significant growth, 382% increase in Q4 revenue to be precise, since our entry into the NASDAQ in 2021. On the launch side, these figures are driven by an increase of Electron launch cadence and the introduction of hypersonic suborbital test launch capabilities. Space Systems contribution has been continued strong execution across both spacecraft and Constellation build and operation, as well as our merchant satellite component businesses. Now, let's dig into these areas in a little bit more detail in the following slides. Our accomplishments in 2024 really speak for those record numbers. On the launch front, we delivered a record number of 16 launches spanning Electron and HASTE, all with 100% mission success. Once again, we've maintained our position as the leading small launch provider globally and the second most frequently launched US rocket annually. We signed more than $450 million in new contracts in 2024 across launch and space systems, further strengthening our backlog, which currently sits at just over $1 billion. We also achieved a world first by successfully launching 2 missions within 24 hours from pads on either side of the planet. On the Space Systems front, there are too many achievements to distill into one slide, so here are just a couple of my favorites. We made significant progress on the design and build of the 40-plus spacecraft in our backlog, but I'm particularly proud of the team completing the manufacture and test of the twin spacecraft for NASA's ESCAPADE mission to Mars. They did this on an impressively short time frame and an incredibly cost competitive for an interplanetary mission. While they're yet to launch, we're excited to see these birds on their way to the Red Planet soon. Our re-entry for Varda was another major milestone, successfully enabling the first in-space manufacturing mission outside the International Space Station. Since first re-entry early last year, we've delivered 2 more Pioneer spacecraft for VADA, with the second returning to Earth in South Australia. Another third Pioneer spacecraft for VADA is just now days away from launch. That's just a tiny snapshot of our achievements in 2024, but before we dig deeper into the updates across Electron, Neutron, and Space Systems, I want to provide an overview of our strategic focus for this year. We're building a truly end-to-end space company. That means owning the full value chain of having the keys to unlock enormous potential from the rapidly growing space economy. The first 2 steps are well underway, with launch and space systems, meaning that we have our own ride to space and we can build and operate the satellites on orbit. The final remaining step is space applications, or delivering data or services from space using our own constellation. In 2024, we made significant progress across all 3, and we're building on that again in 2025. On the launch front, this year is the year of Neutron. We look forward to unlocking the medium launch bottleneck by bringing Neutron to the pad to help launch and more than estimated 10,000 Constellation spacecraft that need deployment in the coming decade. We're continuing to wrap up our small launch cadence with more than 20 missions in 2025 on the manifest across Electron and HASTE. Of course, as usual, these missions only launch when our customers are ready. It's worth pointing out that, as far as I'm aware, Rocket Lab is the only launch provider with missions scheduled this year across small launch, medium launch, hypersonic suborbital test launch. This demonstrates the breadth of our launch experience and capabilities, and also positions us to take advantage of the TAM exposure across several different growing launch markets. On the space systems front, we have more than 40 spacecraft in various stages of production right now. By the end of this summer, by the end of summer this year, we expect to have more than quadruple the number of Rocket Lab spacecraft on orbit, ready to launch, or have completed their missions. I'm also excited to reveal a new addition to our spacecraft lineup, one that slots nicely into our vision for space applications, and I'll talk more about this satellite later in the call. But first, now for some updates on Electron. 2024 was a fantastic year for Electron. Last year, we increased our launch cadence 60% year on year, and 2025 is shaping up to be even bigger. We've launched twice this year already, both times for satellite constellation operators, and each with only 10 days of each other, within 10 days of each other. Last year's trend was building out satellite constellations with Electron. In Q1 2025, this has continued with launches for constellation operators Black Sky and Kinéis, both of whom have booked multiple missions on Electron to deploy or replenish their constellations. Kinéis in particular is worth calling out, since we launched them for the first time in June last year as part of a 5-launch deal. We're now 4 launches in and on track to complete their 5th launch shortly, meaning that we will have deployed their full constellation of 25 satellites in less than a year. Now, to put that into perspective, many constellation operators can wait for a year for their first launch with other providers. Last year, we also signed a multi-launch deal with a Japanese Earth imaging company, IQPS, for 4 Electrons. And then just this month, they signed another agreement to double that and lock in 8 Electron launches for their constellation deployment over 2025 and 2026. In 2024, we built on our success in the small launch market with Electron's suborbital variant, HASTE. Last year's Pentagon budget request for hypersonic research was up 46% to $6.9 billion on the 2 years prior, and we're ideally positioned to support this expanding market. We're the only commercial provider that's executed 2 launches in 21 days for the Department of Defense MARC-TB program, which we completed in Q4, and we have another 5 HASTE missions locked in for the DoD and its contractors. In January, we also announced that we've been selected by Kratos to support the next phase of the MARC-TB program called MARC-TB 2.0. It's a $1.45 billion 5-year contract to expand hypersonic technology testing, and with HASTE, we're uniquely suited to meet that challenge. I think it's also important to place all of that within the wider context of today's geopolitics and America's defense technology. Hypersonics have become increasingly urgent under the new administration. In the words of the president, within the executive order he issued in January to build the Iron Dome for America, the threat of hypersonic and other advanced aerial attacks is the most serious threat facing the United States today. Furthering peace through strength is critical to America's defense. Our capabilities with HASTE, our affordability, and our speed, all of which are the new administration's top priorities, makes it a great product fit to address these challenges. Right, moving on from small launch into Neutron updates. Well, the title really here says it all. This is the year of Neutron, our monopoly breaker to unlock the bottleneck of medium launch. As I said before, there's more than 10,000 satellites that need launch in the next 5 years from commercial constellations alone. And then there's the growing demand from national security and defense missions, as well as interplanetary exploration for the science community, and it goes on. The need is clear, so I won't labour on it, other than to say that the industry is crying out for more launch options in this class, and Neutron is coming to market in record time to deliver it. Neutron is also critical to us launching and operating our own future satellite constellation. So over the next few slides, I'll take you through the latest development milestones and achievements as we work to get Neutron on the pad in the second half of this year. Okay, so at LC3, all major hardware and infrastructure items have arrived and been installed, and our civil works on the site are practically finished. Yes, and we even have water. Most recent updates include the flare stack, a 165-ton steel circular launch mount structure that Neutron will launch from, giant pair of LNG tanks, the ones you can see on the bottom left of the slides. Those are the heaviest objects to have ever crossed the Wallops Island Bridge, and their installation marks the completion of all the long lead propellant storage for the launch site. What's left now is to complete the electrical and mechanical connections for a fully integrated system, but otherwise we look forward to its grand opening in a few short months. Now on to one of the most exciting and novel features of Neutron, its Hungry Hippo fairing. The massive reusable nose cone halves are now live and moving, fully integrated with their avionics and actuators and all of the mechanical systems. We're testing like we're flying, opening and closing the Hungry Hippo at full speed to understand exactly how they behave. And it's glad to say I was there in person for the first lot of testing, and I can tell you that it's a wonderful sound to hear the Hungry Hippo in action. And I fully encourage you to go and check out the video we'll put out today of all of that testing in action. It's pretty cool. We have a few more run-throughs as we add some hardware. Then they'll soon be making their way over to our assembly integration facilities, ready to be fitted to Neutron's first stage for launch. Let me draw your attention to the picture on the top left. That's our stage 1 tank, stacked and ready to ship out. Check out the person at the bottom of the frame for scale, and you can see the size of that tank. All of the launch vehicle is currently in production, with significant parts of it currently in test before being shipped out to the launch site for integration. We're even moving past Flight 1, excuse me, with structures, including fairing halves, already in production for our second Neutron rocket. For Flight 1, though, all of Neutron's largest pieces will soon be moving across the country and making their way to the East Coast. They'll be integrated with all the avionics and software, and it'll go the fit checks and AIT before going straight into full system qualification. So keep an eye out for pictures of tanks on barges to know where we're getting close to that next milestone. Now on to Archimedes. The engine's qualification campaign continues at a cracking pace. We're hot firing every few days, and the testing is going well. We've got engines consistently moving across the country between the production line in Long Beach and the engine test site in Mississippi. You also may have seen we shared a recent update that performance iterations on the production line have resulted more than a couple of 100 kg shed from the engine, which is always good. And also check out the size of that second stage nozzle expansion cone in the bottom left of the slide that were recently produced and on its way for testing. It's a cool thing. Okay, so from engine testing, we're really doubling down on our test cadence to match with the increased production rate out of Long Beach. So we've been running a really intensifying test campaign on multiple engines as we lead up to Flight 1. So in that case, the build of a second Archimedes engine test cell is nearly complete, and this enables us to currently test engines as our investments in production ramp up. So having two cells is always good. Now, we've provided plenty of updates on where Neutron will lift off, but not much where it will land. Here she is, meet return on investment. We named that specifically for Adam Spice. Neutron's 400-foot ocean landing platform, that's what we see on the screen there. With the image at the bottom of the left, also providing a great sense of scale how big this vessel actually is. Alongside shore-based landing sites, and the ocean platform gives us the flexibility to maximize the vehicle's performance by allowing us to dedicate less propellant to landing and more to lifting our customers' payloads to diverse and complex orbits. With the vessel secured, work has now begun on modifying it. We're adding autonomous ground support equipment that secures Neutron to the deck when it lands, heat shielding, propulsive systems, and things to keep it on target for Neutron's return. The landing platform is also a clear indication that we're scaling up and moving past, first minimum viable product with Neutron now. With one launch set for 25, we're aiming to triple that in 26, and then the landing barge is obviously critical to that ramp up. Now, recovery isn't planned on the barge for the first test flight. We'll be doing a soft splashdown, but we can expect return on investment to live up to its name in 26 when it enters service for all the future Neutron flights. Now, the road to launch. I'm often asked, what should we look at to indicate Neutron's progress to the pad, because there's just so much going on. So we tried to create a little bit of a visual overview here of the big ticket items that we're running concurrently right now and what's left to go to get to the pad. We've always been clear that we run aggressive schedules, and that gets us to the pad on a rapid time frame. But of course, nobody wants to get the rocket faster to the pad than I do. The important thing to point out here is that these tasks are not serial. We don't wait to finish one before starting the next. Everything has been worked on concurrently, and some of them are long lead pieces that might come together just days before the launch. For example, a launch license. This isn't our first rodeo, as everyone knows. We're no strangers to bringing in a new rocket to market. We're running aggressive schedules, as we always do. At the end of the day, as I've always said, it's
There will be a slight delay in today's conference. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the operator. There will be a slight delay in today's conference. Please hold and the call will resume momentarily. Thank you for your patience.
Oh no! What do you think so far, Scotto?
Not as bad as the market's perceiving it, I guess. Like I'm loving it. I mean,
I'm loving it. As always, it's a college course with these guys.
mm-hmm.
Hey, welcome, my friend. Oh, hey.
Hey, this is why it crashed. Vin showed up.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I called Rocket Lab and I'm like, guys, you started without me, and then they're like, okay, we take Peter off the. Yeah, hit the reset, exactly.
Have you been listening in, Vince, or are you kind of
Yeah. It's funny. I was like hurrying home to make it in time, and when I arrived home, like our son got sick, so my wife was like, "Here's a baby," and I'm like, "I have a conference call," so I came as fast as I could.
Bleecker Street didn't like the water comment, so I think they hit the electricity.
But my phone has been hacked because it says Rocket Lab is like down 10%. Can you guys explain?
Nope.
Looks like a great day to buy tomorrow. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
See, I can understand if like there was actually a reason, like they shit the bed, excuse my language, on revenue generation or something like that. But like everything I'm seeing is just what you say is what you get with Rocket Lab, right? And so I'm struggling to really,
it's a gift for all the people who thought 30 was too expensive. And
I'm excited, man. I just wish I had more money. I hope it stays down for the next. If it can stay down for the next month, please, Lord. Like I have such an. I was telling Amit, I was briefed on his channel. I'm closing on a house on March 10th. Actually, maybe it's the 11th. But so obviously I can't move too much money right now. But next month I have a large influx of cash. So if I could please.
Sorry about that, everyone. I'm not sure why the. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm not sure why the line dropped there, but I'll reiterate the previous slide just to make sure that everybody got it. So I'm often asked what we should look for and to indicate Neutron's progress to the pad. So we've created a visual overview here of the big ticket items that we're running concurrently right now and what is left to go to get us to the pad and flight this year. We've always been really clear that we run aggressive schedules and that gets us to the pad quickly. And of course, I want to get to the pad faster than anybody else. The important thing to point out here is all these tasks are not serial. We don't wait to finish one before starting the next. Everything has been worked concurrently, and some of them are long lead pieces that come together literally days before the launch. For example, a launch license. And now, of course, this isn't our first rodeo, and we're no strangers to bringing a new rocket to the pad. We run aggressive schedules, and at the end of the day, as I always say, it's a rocket program. But right now, we're planning for first launch in the second half of this year. I'm very happy with the progress of the development program. Neutron is going to be a really important vehicle for the industry, and we're excited to be the ones delivering that. So moving on from launch now, and to provide some updates on our space systems businesses. I'm happy to share mission success for our latest spacecraft Vada. In the early hours of this morning, and I mean early, our Pioneer spacecraft flawlessly executed an Earth re-entry maneuver and deployed Vada's capsule to land in South Australia. The mission was launched in January and had been operating on orbit for over a month, delivering critical mission functions for Vada's capsule. We have our third Pioneer-class satellite with its Vada capsule ready and waiting for launch in the coming days, which is the second satellite ready for launch of this program within a month. For our space systems team, they're busy right now helping land a NASA lunar lander mission on the moon. After its 45-day journey through space, our very own space-grade solar cells have provided over 1,400 operational hours of power for this mission, while the space software team have been providing 24/7 support for the orbit control and engine burns that have gotten this far. They'll be continuing that support for the mission right through its most critical phases too, including landing on the moon itself. On the national defence side, our team is really hitting their stride with two critical programs. We're now deep into the detailed design phase of our $500 million prime contract with the Space Development Agency. Early last month, we cleared a critical step of the program, the first design review that ensures our satellites and how they operate all meet the rigorous mission requirements set down by the US Department of Defense. All 18 satellites use practically every one of our integrated subsystems and components, including solar panels, composite structures, star trackers, reaction wheels, radios, flight, ground software, avionics, launch dispensers, and so on and so forth. It's a high-level control over our own products within our own prime programs that gives us the ability to deliver world-class national defence solutions with certainty on cost and schedule and, of course, quality. We also have our 24-hour notice responsive space mission coming up this year for the US Space Force. This one is our $32 million Victus Haze mission with a Rocket Lab satellite launching on a Rocket Lab Electron on short notice to demonstrate that we can respond to threats on very short timelines. In the defence industry, that's called tactically responsive space. It's a hugely complex yet sought-after capability that the Pentagon is eager to have on hand with trusted commercial partners. With their proven capabilities across space systems and launch, it's a position we're uniquely suited for. Now, most of those missions employ spacecraft from our lineup of standard vertically integrated satellites that we announced last year. But today I'm excited to share a big announcement. Please meet Flatellite, a low-cost, mass-producible satellite tailored for large constellations. Now, we've developed Flatellite after many years of working closely with constellation operators and getting to deeply understand their needs of today and, of course, into the future. Flatellite is a scalable, resilient, high-power satellite that can enable capabilities such as secure low-latency, high-speed connectivity and remote sensing for national security, defense, and commercial markets. With Flatellite, we can do something few spacecraft manufacturers can. We can build it fast, cost-effectively, and in high volumes thanks to our experience in spacecraft production combined with deep vertical integration of our in-house components. This puts us in greater control of cost and schedule than others relying on constrained supply chains. What's more, once we've built them, we can launch them ourselves too. That's thanks to its low-profile stackable design, we can maximize the number of Flatellites launched per mission, ensuring seamless integration with Neutron. The bottom far right render with Flatellite stacked inside Neutron's fairings gives you a bit of an idea of the sense of scale here. Now, the Flatellite is more than just a new product development to serve our customers' ever-evolving needs, though. It's a bold, strategic move towards completing the final step of Rocket Lab's ultimate vision of truly becoming an end-to-end space company and operating its own constellation and delivering services from space. By having our own ride to space with Neutron and Electron and being able to build our own spacecraft in high volumes, We're at a distinct advantage when it comes to establishing constellations with speed and cost efficiency. It's about all we can share on Flatellite today, but I'm excited to be able to share more with you soon on this, so watch this space. So with that, I'll hand it over to Adam now to provide further commentary and to discuss our financial highlights and outlook.
Thanks, Pete. Fourth quarter 2024 revenue was $132 million, which was above the midpoint of our prior guidance range and reflects significant year-over-year growth of 121%, driven by strong contribution from both business segments, but led by Space Systems. Fourth quarter revenue represented a sequential increase of 26.3%, primarily due to the increase in launches from 3 to 5, including 2 HASTE missions during the quarter, which come at a higher ASP versus standard Electron missions. On a full year basis, 2024 revenue was $436 million, an impressive growth of approximately 78% year on year. Our launch services segment delivered revenue of $42.4 million, and our current Electron and HASTE backlog continues to support an increasing ASP with some quarterly variability tied to volume purchase commitments, launch location, and mission assurance requirements. On a full year basis, launch delivered revenue of $125.4 million, which is an increase of roughly 74% year on year. Our Space Systems segment delivered $90 million in the quarter, reflecting sequential growth of over 7%, driven primarily by a strong quarter from satellite manufacturing and our attitude, direction, and control subsystems business. On a full year basis, Space Systems delivered revenue of $310.8 million, or an increase of 80% year on year. Now, turning to gross margin. GAAP gross margin for the fourth quarter was 27.8%, at the high end of our prior guidance range of 26 to 28%. Non-GAAP gross margin for the fourth quarter was 34%, which was also at the high end of our prior guidance range of 32 to 34%. On a full year basis, GAAP gross margin was 26.6%, while non-GAAP gross margin was 32%. Although gross margins in our launch business can be volatile quarter to quarter, dependent upon customer mix and mission type, in 2025, we expect continued margin expansion in both segments as Electron's cadence continues to increase at higher ASPs and our Space Systems business continues to scale. Relatedly, we ended Q4 with production-related headcount of 1,004 heads, up 40 from the prior quarter. Turning to backlog, we ended Q4 2024 with $1.07 billion of total backlog, with launch backlog of $386 million and Space Systems backlog of $681 million. While year-on-year backlog growth was modest at approximately 2%, this should be put in the context of increasing lumpiness of backlog additions, given the timing of increasingly larger needle-moving deals and customer program opportunities. Sequentially, there was a slight remixing of our backlog as a result of particularly strong bookings in our launch segment, which we expect to continue as we convert our pipeline of Neutron opportunities. At first glance, our backlog has roughly a 50-50 split between government and commercial, but as you dig deeper, many of our commercial customers ultimately cater to the needs of the U.S. government and other friendly nations. We view this as a significant advantage, especially in evolving political and budgetary environments, as government's focus on space and efficiency remains a high priority. We continue to cultivate a healthy pipeline, including multi-launch deals and large satellite manufacturing contracts that, as mentioned earlier, can create lumpiness in backlog growth given the size and complexity of these opportunities. We expect approximately 50% of current backlog to be recognized as revenues within 12 months. Turning to operating expenses in the quarter. GAAP operating expenses for the fourth quarter of 2024 were $88.4 million, modestly above our guidance range of $84 to $86 million. Non-GAAP operating expenses for the fourth quarter were $74.5 million, just below our guidance range of $75 to $77 million. GAAP operating expenses grew 39% from the prior year fourth quarter, almost entirely related to a step up in Neutron spending, particularly Archimedes testing, investments in composite structures development, and IT-related spending, including a step up in cybersecurity requirements related to our U.S. government programs. Non-GAAP operating expenses also grew 39% year on year, largely due to the same reasons as our GAAP OpEx increases, less the effect of stock-based compensation expenses and non-recurring transaction costs. Now focusing on quarter-over-quarter changes. The sequential increases in both GAAP and non-GAAP operating expenses were primarily driven by continued growth in headcount and prototype spending to support our Neutron development program, and related IT infrastructure and IT support for both Neutron and our SDA satellite contract. In R&D specifically, GAAP expenses increased $532,000 quarter on quarter due to Neutron prototyping materials and headcount growth. Non-GAAP R&D expenses were up $3.3 million quarter on quarter, more than the GAAP increase, due to the fluctuations in non-cash stock-based compensation between R&D and cost of sales related to the EAC accounting of our space systems manufacturing programs. As such, the non-GAAP R&D increase of $3.3 million represents well the underlying trend in core R&D spend in the business, again, driven largely by investments in Neutron. Q4 ending R&D headcount was 828, representing an increase of 52 from the prior quarter. In SG&A, GAAP expenses increased $7.9 million quarter on quarter, largely due to an increase in outside services related to IT, legal, and finance, with IT spend largely related to security and cybersecurity requirements under our SDA contract, legal spend supporting a range of corporate initiatives, including corporate development, and year-end audit activities, which are paired with an increase in staff costs. With that GAAP spend, we reported non-recurring transaction costs of $2.2 million in Q4, owing to a step up in corporate development activities, including advancing a robust pipeline of M&A opportunities. Non-GAAP SG&A expenses increased by $2.5 million, driven by the previously mentioned GAAP increases. Q4 ending SG&A headcount was 329, representing an increase of 29 from the prior quarter. In summary, total fourth quarter headcount was 2,161, up 121 heads from the prior quarter. Turning to cash, purchases of property, equipment, and capitalized software licenses were $21.5 million in the fourth quarter of 2024, an increase of $10.5 million from the $11 million in the third quarter of 2024. As we continue to invest in Neutron research, testing, and scaling production, we expect increased capital expenditures to continue for the next few quarters. Cash consumed from operations was $2.4 million in the fourth quarter of 2024, compared to $30.9 million in the third quarter of 2024. The sequential improvement of $28.5 million was driven primarily by the increased Space Systems program's milestone receipts, which can be lumpy. Overall, non-GAAP free cash flow, defined as GAAP operating cash flow less purchases of property, equipment, and capitalized software in the fourth quarter of 2024, was a use of $23.9 million, compared to $41.9 million in the third quarter of 2024. We do expect a pickup in cash consumption in Q1, owing to an expected increase in Neutron spending ahead of our 2025 launch and the lumpiness in large contract-driven Space Systems milestone collections, which are projected to be lower in Q1 off a strong Q4, combined with higher payment outflows to our SDA program subcons that we expect will ultimately be reflected in higher revenue recognition in the back half of 2025. The ending balance of cash, cash equivalents, restricted cash, and marketable securities was $484 million as of the end of the fourth quarter of 2024. We exited Q4 in a strong position to execute on our organic expansion initiatives, as well as inorganic options to further vertically integrate our supply chain with the critical capabilities and expand our addressable market, consistent with what we have done successfully in the past. Adjusted EBITDA loss was $23.2 million in the fourth quarter of 2024, modestly above our guidance range of a $27 to $29 million loss. The sequential improvement of $7.7 million was primarily driven by revenue growth and gross margin improvement across both segments. And with that, let's turn to our guidance for the first quarter of 2025. We expect revenue in the first quarter to range between $117 and $123 million, representing approximately 29% year-on-year revenue growth at the midpoint, and expect a return to sequential growth in Q2, driven by strength in our Space Systems business. We expect first quarter GAAP gross margin to range between 25% to 27% and non-GAAP gross margin to range between 30% to 32%. These forecasted GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins reflect less favorable mix within our Space Systems segment and a lower launch ASP driven by customer mix discussed earlier. We expect first quarter GAAP operating expenses to range between $93 million and $95 million, and non-GAAP operating expenses to range between $77 and $79 million. The quarter-on-quarter increases are driven primarily by continued Neutron investment into staff costs, prototyping, and materials. We expect first quarter GAAP and non-GAAP net interest expense to be $2.7 million. We expect first quarter adjusted EBITDA loss to range between $33 million and $35 million, and basic weighted average common shares outstanding to be approximately 458 million shares, which excludes convertible preferred shares of approximately 51 million. Lastly, given where we are in the final push to not only get Neutron to the pad this year, but also make advanced production scaling CapEx investments, such as the recovery barge that Pete spoke about earlier, as well as investing in inventory for subsequent Neutron tails beyond the test launch tail this year, cash consumption will increase and diverge more than it has normally from adjusted EBITDA. We continue to see the program investment in getting to Neutron minimum viable product and infrastructure to be consistent with our initial estimates of approximately $250 million to $300 million, having spent approximately $200 million of gross GAAP OpEx and CapEx through the end of 2024 on this program. Specifically, over the last 4 quarters, total cash consumption has been running between approximately $20 million and $40 million per quarter, and we expect this number to increase in Q1 due to a combination of these Neutron-related investments, as well as long lead procurement items for our SDA program, and a lack of significant contractual milestone payments receivable across our MDA Globalstar and SDA programs in the quarter. While we proactively manage the working capital elements of our business, this unique situation is likely to result in an increase in cash consumption to approximately double from this prior range of $20 million to $40 million in Q1. We expect this dynamic to moderate in coming quarters with the resumption of contractual milestone payment schedules under our large Space Systems programs, and as we get the minimum viable infrastructure in place to support the inaugural launch of Neutron later this year. And with that, we'll hand the call over to the operator for questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. At this time, I would like to remind everyone to ask a question. Press the star button followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, please press the pound key or star 2. One moment, please, for your first question. Your first question comes from the line of Edison Yu of Deutsche Bank. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking our questions. The first one on Neutron, and to check the language around the timing. I think in the past it's been talked about as mid-2025. Now you're saying second half. Is this just kind of, semantics, it's a couple months, or are you trying to maybe put some cushion or take more time with any of the processes?
Yeah, hey Edison. We've sort of said in the past mid 2025. So yeah, we're taking giving ourselves a little bit more time to get it to the pad and get the launch. But I mean, we're talking months here. It's not very material.
Understood. And just in terms of the launch itself, what would you kind of define as success? And I frame it in the context of, let's say it gets to orbit. Does that mean we're pretty confident in the 3 for next year? Just curious on the parameters for what you would define as a mission success.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our intention is to go to orbit. We're not anything less than that is not where we want to be. So no, our intention is orbital on the first flight, which I think some people in the space industry who know it well realizes that's difficult to do. But like I say, this is our second time round, so that's what we define as success for that mission.
Thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Andres Shepherd of Cantor Fitzgerald. Please go ahead.
Hey everyone, congratulations on the quarter and thanks for the very thorough updates. Congrats on all the progress as well. Peter, just maybe to follow up on the Neutron question, maybe another way to ask is, how confident are you in launching this year? And as we look into 2026, how should we think about the revenue mix starting to shift between space systems and launch systems? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll ask the first part of the question, Andre, and then pass it off to Adam for the second half. But I mean, look, we're not tracking any major events that would cause us to be concerned about trying to get this away this year. I always caveat anything with it's a rocket program. I mean, we have some major tests to complete, but at this stage, we're tracking pretty confidently to try and get this launch away.
Yeah, and I can take the second piece of that, Andre. So, yeah, the mix in this business, I think, will be, it's not going to be too unpredictable. So if we continue to see growth in our Electron business, now that will become over time a smaller part. Of course, it's all of our launch revenue today. It'll become a piece of the launch business once Neutron starts to fly in its revenue generating form. So look, if you extend, our launch business that we, as Pete mentioned earlier, north of 20 launches this year, as with the manifests, it would indicate continued growth off of that into 26. So you've got some natural growth there, but then you start to introduce, if you talk about 3 Neutron launches at the prices that we've discussed previously in the $50 to $55 million range, you're looking at potentially equaling in kind of that first year of revenue production for Neutron to equal what Electron is in what it's like 8th year of production. So that kind of just indicates, the power that Neutron brings to the model. But we also expect significant growth in our space systems business to continue in 2026. So I would say that we will see a remixing and a rebalancing, and probably, recently we've been about a 70-30 mix of space systems to launch. And I think you'll see launch become greater in that mix. I don't think it'll become, necessarily more than 50% of the overall mix if you look into 2026. But I think longer term, Pete and I always talked about, we like having that kind of 2/3, 1/3 space system to launch mix, just given the lumpiness that launch naturally has, given customer readiness and so forth. So, I think right now we're kind of in a sweet spot. I think we're going to probably over-index a little bit to launch as Neutron scales, and then I think over time we'll kind of balance that back out to our ideal mix of kind of 2/3 space system, 1/3 launch.
Got it. That's super helpful, guys. Really appreciate that. Maybe just a quick follow-up on space systems. Can you maybe just remind us, what are some key awards or key catalysts that we can look for this year, or maybe things that are not necessarily reflected in the backlog? Thank you.
Yeah, Andre, as Adam kind of mentioned in the call, the kind of programs that we chase are not little programs. We chase fairly significant programs, and as a result, it kind of creates a little bit of lumpiness in the backlog. And obviously we've been very competitive on the SDA mission, so we'll continue to bid on those. And there's a whole bunch of new missions that have been created relatively recently to do with the Iron Dome that we think we're well placed for as well. So we'll continue to do the things and bid on the things that make sense. And it's fair to say though that there is also some uncertainty in the industry under the new administration in the Defense Force about which programs are getting accelerated and which programs are getting slowed down. So we just sort of have to roll with that a little bit.
Wonderful, super helpful again, and congratulations on the quarter. I'll pass it on.
Your next question comes from the line of Suji De Silva of Roth Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi, Peter. Hi, Adam. Congratulations on naming a boat, Adam. So the Neutron cost, I just want to understand if it's still your expectation as Neutron takes its first launch that some of those stair step down. And if so, would that be kind of concurrently with the first launch, lag a little, perhaps lead as it kind of the spend is ahead? Any color there would be helpful.
Yeah, I can take a pass at that first part, and then Pete can jump in. So when you think about Neutron costs, obviously this first test launch is an R&D launch. There won't be any revenue associated with that launch. And so as you look forward, of course, there's going to be, as we get some production efficiencies as you move from the first tail to the second tail to the third tail, that's always important. But I think the more meaningful thing, obviously, and the big focus item for us to really get the Neutron economics to come into focus is really reusability. And so, Pete introduced the barge earlier today, and I like the name of that. Certainly, your return on investment is exactly what that barge is intended to do. But it's really about how quickly can we stick that first landing, right? So again, we're not going to attempt it on the first one. The question is, when do we feel comfortable to attempt it? And then when we do, if we're successful, putting that booster into reuse and going just as kind of we've seen SpaceX do. You hopefully you get to reuse it a few times, and then maybe as you learn more, you can ultimately reuse that booster as we designed it to use at least 20 times. And really, when you start to amortize the cost of that expensive booster over a significant number of launches, that's really where the margin expansion comes into. So the cost of a Neutron launch is really going to be dictated far and away by, more than anything else, reusability. And I don't know if Pete wants to add anything to that.
No, you said it. You said it exactly what I was going to say. Is that is a critical element, and the only bit to add is that the way that Neutron is designed, of course, is to burden the most amount of cost into that first stage as possible of the vehicle, because we are in fact reusing it. So that's been an important design element for the vehicle.
Okay, great. And my other question's on the new product, the Flatellite product. It seems like this is your entry into satellite constellation satellites. Wondering if there's a cost per satellite advantage you may have with the architecture versus what's currently in the marketplace or what's planned from competitors, competitive offerings, or how else we should think about the advantages of this product as constellations become and constellation economics become a big part of putting this in space.
No, that's a great question. So generally, the way the conversations go is how fast can you make it, and then how cheap is it? That's generally the order of events. And being so vertically integrated, we really shine on how fast you can make it, because basically over the years we've just slowly been integrating more and more stuff and building more and more things in house. So that gives us a huge edge. And then of course because we're building rockets and large structures and equipment, we just have tremendous amount of capability, whether it be machine shops or composites, and you name it, robotics. We just have a huge amount of capability to really execute on. And this is I guess where I think to really be a large competitive player in this industry, as I've always said, you have to have your ability to build satellites at scale, and you have to have the ability to launch at scale. And launches getting done with Neutron, and I'd say we're very far down the path now with space systems, and the introduction of Flatellite is really a combination of a number of years' work to get a product that can truly be very low cost and very high volume.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Thanks, Adam.
Cheers.
Your next question comes from the line of Trevor Walsh of Citizens JMP. Please go ahead.
Great. Hey, gents, thanks for taking the question. Just to piggyback off that Flatellite question, Peter, is there, I think the deck said there was flexibility around the payload, and just in kind of looking how you're going to have this sort of stacking mix there within Neutron, are there any limitations around the payload or like type of payload? I'm thinking more kind of in the Earth sensing kind of, the Earth observation type realm as far as cameras and such.
Yeah, that's a great question, Trevor. So, I mean, the flat structure doesn't lend itself to large optical apertures, that's for sure, like big telescopes. But basically everything else, it's super ideal for. So we do, the way the structure is designed is we do have flexibility to grow the payload bay depth and array sizes pretty easily. It's like think of it like a ladder backpack onto those structures. So we can shrink and grow the various payloads pretty easily. So we've really given a lot of thought to not only what our customers are asking us now, but future proof in their design so that we can address a number of different applications with it.
Great, awesome. Appreciate the color. And then maybe Adam, one quick follow up for you. Around the R&D headcount increases, and maybe more specific to Neutron, would the plan for those kind of heads be to kind of stay within the Neutron family, or would they be able to be tasked and used kind of broader around launch or even into space systems? Just trying to get a sense of kind of, again, around the cost question for Neutron, if headcount requirements kind of once the first launch goes abate a little bit, and just how that kind of, again, more headcount employee type base kind of costs around the build out kind of might flow. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to think more of it in terms of kind of how does the P&L morph over time. And I think certainly as we get past the first launch, you'll see R&D begin to subside pretty significantly. Now, a lot of the heads, if we kind of take our past experience and kind of extrapolate that out, we tend to hire very talented kind of athletes, if you will, in engineering functions, which can do lots of different things. And so you find people that are, super effective doing R&D work, and then they pivot over to production and they kind of work on, production engineering, ME type of support work. So I wouldn't think so much of kind of, elimination as much as repurposing from R&D into production, because as you're ramping a new vehicle, there's still R&D type of elements and kind of skills that are necessary to kind of bring that vehicle into its mature state. So that's the way I would encourage it. So certainly we expect a significant step down in R&D, but those heads just really kind of, or the expense related to those types of heads really move into cost of sales at that point. And I'll maybe let Pete speak to the mix if he has any different views. But certainly, I think the one thing that's key is, aside from the heads, certainly prototyping expenses will drop significantly. And a lot of what we're spending our money on today for Neutron is prototyping expense, which is flowing through R&D.
Yeah, I think you said it well, Adam. Nothing to add there further.
Right.
Great. Thanks, both. Appreciate the questions.
Your next question comes from the line of Michael Leshock of KeyBanc Capital Markets. Please go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my question. I wanted to start on the Archimedes hot fires. You've significantly increased your testing cadence there, and the fire looks very clean. So really good to see that. And just wondering if you could touch on any of the changes that you've made to the propulsion system since the initial hot fire last August, and kind of where does Archimedes sit today in terms of readiness for the first launch and meeting or exceeding your performance requirements?
Yeah, hey Michael, good questions. We're running the engines, just all the time. A qualification program, it covers a lot of different run conditions, and it's not like the engine just needs to start on the ground once and ascend. We have a whole bunch of other run conditions where the propellant needs to sit for a while and do the re-entry and landing burns. Then, of course, the stage 1 engine is the same as stage 2, so you've got big coast periods and relights. So the qualification campaign is pretty big. I'm pretty happy with the engine, to be fair. The changes that we made, to remove mass, were in large part to increase production ability. Whenever you design something and you put it in production, you inevitably find the things that you don't like. So being agile enough at this stage to change the various things we want to is the right time to do it. It gets harder once the engine's all qualified, and the team's just working through it. And we added that extra cell for the very reason is just a tremendous amount of testing to get through and tweaking, and so we're just kind of hammering away at it.
Okay, great. And maybe shifting to Electron, if we look longer term at Electron's launch prospects, If LC1 can provide 120 launch opportunities annually, and then maybe another 12 at LC2, is the strategy, are you looking to max out the launch capacity with maybe over 100 plus launches per year, or does the supply demand environment create a more attractive business model at maybe 30 or 40 electrons per year? Just wondering where that sweet spot is for electron launches as we look out 3 to 5 plus years down the road.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, my answer is as many as possible, right? That's what we want to see. When we developed LC1 and we had to license that site, we obviously never wanted to be constrained by by the licensing on that site. So we just thought of the biggest number we could back in 2016, and that's that. So we have plenty of capacity there, and even the capacity, even though that we've got 12 capacity out of LC2, that can be amended and improved. So that's not that much of a constraint either. But it's really just the market demand, and the good news is it continues to grow year on year. Every year we sell more electrons than the previous year, which is great. But that's really the driving factor behind it. And as we look out, in the following years, we've seen strong growth in electron sales year on year.
Appreciate all the color and congrats on all the milestones in the quarter.
Thanks, Michael.
Your next question comes from the line of Jason Gursky of Citi. Please go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hey, Peter, recognizing that space is hard, you guys are running aggressive timelines to your own admission on the Neutron. Maybe you could just walk us through the things that have caused the delays at each point. So I think we had push from the second half of 24 into mid 25, now into the second half of 25. What are you seeing that is causing you to make those changes?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Well, I mean, firstly, if we stand back and look at the context of the timeline of a rocket program, this is still crazy fast compared to just about any historic rocket program. So there is there's that. It was always good to anchor on that. But look, there's no one thing. It's not like we had a giant engine failure or a tank failure or anything like that. There's no one thing. I would say probably the most frustrating thing is some of the large structures and third-party providers. We always end up having to pull stuff in house because we get let down by a number of providers, and I'd say that's caused a bit of delay early in the program. It's fair to say that we had to deal with some kind of COVID issues, so we just couldn't get concrete and we couldn't get steel, couldn't buy CNC machines. Those things had really long lead times associated with them. Now, of course, that's not the case now, but that sort of got us off to a little bit of a slow start. But there's no like one big thing that's just sort of got on the road. We continue to push hard, and there's, like I say, there's no giant thing. And if something went put its leg well out of bed, then of course we would let everybody know. But at the moment, we're just sort of just eating away at it.
Yeah. And you mentioned suppliers. How much dependency do you have at this point to get this all wrapped up? Is this 90% under your control at this point? Do you still have some dependencies with suppliers?
Yeah, well, as we transition into rate production of the product, we have that much more under our roof. When you're building large steel structures and launch sites and things like that, you don't have that in-house capability to do those kinds of things. The early prototypes were hand laid rather than being made on the AFP machine, which is now of course up and running and commissioned. So some of those things delay, but there's just some practicalities around doing things for one-off. It doesn't make sense to build all that capability in-house. But I'd say as time goes on and as rate production starts to increase, we become far less reliant on those external contractors.
Right. Okay. I've got just a few more quick ones, if you'll humor me. On the pipeline
Sure.
in space systems, in space systems in the pipeline, I'm just kind of curious what you are seeing and what the shape of that business might look like in the future. And I'm thinking about it split between you being the OEM or the kind of the prime building the full spacecraft versus you being a supplier into others. What do you see out there? Are you guys going to end up being more of a components business, more of an OEM? Is it going to be a 50-50 split? I'm just kind of curious what you're seeing.
Well, I think our aspiration, Jason, is we want to provide the service. So a higher tier than certainly just building the satellite, and the higher tier again just providing the components. But the beauty of the way that we run the business is that we can fiercely bid on a program that we want to go after, and even if we don't win, we still end up kind of winning because chances are we'll have some content and components in many of those larger programs. But certainly there's a few things we're going after, right? One is very, very large US government programs, which we think we have some very discriminating technologies or capabilities. And then, of course, other large commercial constellations and programs, which you've seen us execute against as well. And always, we like to have a NASA science mission on the books as well. So, we've generally had a moon mission, a Mars mission, or something on the books because we believe that's important to create technologies and for the company. So you'll see those consistent sort of programs going out. But I mean, where we're really trying to get to is providing the service, not just providing components or subsystems or satellite buses.
Right. So then that Adam, I'll get you involved here really quickly then. So your comment about 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 on the services and 1/3 on launch, does that include this like third leg that you are all planning to stand up at some point, the services part of the business? I'm trying to figure out whether you're going to be adding a new segment at some point, or if that services part where you're going to be operating constellations will be a part of the space systems business, and that 2/3, 1/3 mix is kind of what you were kind of gets encapsulated into that.
Yeah, well, I think given the overall much larger size of the opportunity on the application side, I would expect that to fundamentally change that overall mix, right? I think that just if we kind of look at and we've articulated the total addressable market opportunity in each segment. Launch we've articulated it's roughly a $10 billion TAM. Systems and subsystems around satellites are around a $30 billion TAM, and then the applications is perhaps an order of magnitude of that. So really, I think over time, the 2/3, 1/3 was really a function of kind of the business as it exists today without without that third leg of the stool. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I confirmed that. Yeah. Didn't want people to be hanging on that word. And then two last really quick ones. Tariffs. Next Tuesday could be a big day. Do you have any exposure to Canada or Mexico in particular? I'm thinking, there's some guys up in Canada that make antennas. I don't know if you're reliant on them. I'm just kind of curious. You're performing against firm fixed price contracts where some of your inputs might be going up in price as a result of some tariffs that come into the fold next week.
Yeah, I mean, I can make some comment there, and then
go ahead.
And then I'll pass it. Yeah. So obviously we have Sinclair Interplanetary, so they're a Toronto-based reaction wheels and star tracker business unit up there. So we do have some exposure. But maybe Adam, you're probably best placed on some of the financial questions.
Yeah, Jason, we really don't have a lot of exposure. We certainly have our reaction wheels and star tracker and sun sensor business that we acquired several years ago up in Toronto. But I would say that doesn't really. I would say we don't do mass volume production of those solutions, especially the reaction wheels in Canada. Those take place actually in New Zealand. And certainly with our MDA Global Star situation where we actually do the buses and then we ship the buses to Montreal for AIT, it's really going from the U.S. to Canada. And there's I'm sure there's a lot of intricacies around kind of how you the value those systems they go across that border. But right now, I'd say, look, we don't see tariffs as impacting us, significantly at this point. I think we're pretty fortunate that the majority of our, I'd say, intensity within the company is really between the U.S. and New Zealand.
Right. Okay, great. I'll leave it there. I appreciate the time, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Your next question comes from the line of Eric Rasmussen of Stifel. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for taking the questions. Maybe just on the Flatellite, the new satellite, low-cost satellite. What is the throughput expectation for that? And do you have sort of the infrastructure to support your aspirations in that new opportunity?
Yeah, hey, Eric. So the throughput of that is designed to be a couple of satellites a week up to a satellite a day, depending on the customer or the opportunity that we go after. We've got some pretty. Well, you've been to some of the facilities. The headquarters building, which is now basically a satellite manufacturing facility, has ample kind of space to be able to execute that. And if you look across all the subsystems, there's in many areas we've already scaled, whether it be solar or reaction wheel. So in some of those systems we provide to some of the larger constellations already. So those things are already being produced at scale. But as far as final integration, I mean, we stand up and bring down lines for spacecraft, now relatively frequently, depending on what the customer needs. So, I would say that the vast majority of the capability exists.
Great. And then maybe just on Neutron, the push out, and it really, again, it doesn't sound like a whole big change. I mean, I think you were talking about the last update was no earlier than mid 2025, and I think everyone was just so focused on just mid 25. But here it's second half. But what I guess how achievable is this at this point? I mean, do you consider this less of a stretch goal than sort of where we were the last time when you made the no earlier than 2025 estimate?
Yeah, feels about the same, to be honest with you, Eric. I mean, if in a few months here and there, it's really in the noise. But we just want to be as transparent as we can where we see things. And but yeah, look, I mean, what we're trying to bring here to market in this vehicle in such a short time frame, it's like I say, it's kind of in the noise. But yeah, we've been transparent.
Okay. Maybe then on Electron, have you seen any changes in customer behavior or demand that maybe suggest things are slower than what you expected? Because I think I recall for this year, we were maybe looking at around 26 launches, but it sounds like you're expecting around 20 or so launches for this year. Any sort of comments you can make on that?
Well, I think we're just being a little bit more cautious this year because we had a big manifest last year and we launched everything that turned up. So and that's the kind of the reality of the Electron product. That's why people pay the premium, is because they get to launch when they need to launch. So we have a really strong sales year last year and so far this year for Electron. As you saw, we added a bunch more this year alone. And we continue to see growth in that product. So it certainly doesn't feel like it's slowing down from our perspective, but I think it's certainly the sales cycles and sales aren't. But I think we're always a little bit cautious because in promising how many launches we're going to do, because it's just not in our control.
Yeah, and Eric, I would focus on just the growth in the backlog, and I think the thing that gives us encouragement is the fact that we're seeing increasing size of the contracts that we're signing with customers as far as numbers of launches. It's in new areas as well, so that Electron business is diversifying now, particularly with HASTE. So we've got diversity increasing in the business, absolute increase in scale, and with that, increasing ASPs. And as we've talked about many times before across, various conferences and venues, this business is it's a scale business, right? You have to, the more you can absorb those standing costs across a greater number of units, your economics get much better. And that's actually what we see playing out over the coming quarters is as we continue to scale the launch cadence, the margins benefit significantly as you just get to absorb those relatively static fixed costs over a greater number of units. So yeah, I agree with Pete. I don't think there's nothing that I see when we have our demand assessment, kind of reviews internally that would say this market's slowing down at all. In fact, I think kind of adding that haste leg to the stool, I think is super helpful and encouraging because that's a very strategic, need that's being met in a unique way by this vehicle. So I think we're very encouraged by what we see.
Great. I just want to maybe bounce back to Neutron real quick. With this updated timeline, are you still within sort of the framework of being able to support NSSL? Maybe just talk about that timeline in relation to sort of your new update.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we were working alongside the Space Force and have done for many years. And no, it won't affect that the ability to on ramp. I mean, the criteria is a credible path to launch by the end of the year, and by absolutely by all measures of that, I think we're fine.
Great, thank you.
Your next question comes from the line of Andre Madrid of BTIG. Please go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for the question. To touch back on space apps, I know this has always kind of been on in the background, even going back to when you guys first went public in 21. Given that you're comfortable unveiling the Flatellite platform today, could you maybe walk us through how you'd expect this application to materially contribute to the business through the years? Maybe, when we could see a meaningful step up of any measure?
Yeah, hey, Andre. Well, I mean, look, it's kind of difficult to talk about that. I mean, the most important thing really is Neutron because if we take our friends over at SpaceX, and the Starlink constellation, Starlink is a great satellite, but the real needle mover there was high frequency, low cost launch. That's why Neutron is so important. So we kind of methodically, step by step, creating all of the right ingredients to be able to build constellations at scale. But the really, really important element of that is Neutron. And while that's occurring in the background, we've just, like I say, just methodically building the capability to on the spacecraft side.
Yep. No, that's a good point. I appreciate you highlighting that. And then maybe if I may, follow up, looking at the true backlog mix, I know Adam touched on this before, but it's 50-50 commercial defense / national security. But I mean, given that like you said, sizable portion of commercial is bound for defense and national security customers. What's the true mix, do you think?
It's probably I would say probably more like 70-30. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, maybe even higher than that. I think it's probably closer to north of 80% would be the end, I'd say, consumption of the data coming off the things that we launch get consumed in one way or other by a government, whether it's U.S. government or other governments. If you look at again, a lot of the Electron's a really popular vehicle for remote sensing capabilities. And again, a lot of those customers, it used to be people were saying that, counting cars in Walmart parking lots was going to be the killer app for Earth observation. That clearly wasn't the case. It ends up being selling, much of what gets generated from these commercial constellations to the U.S. government for, national security, weather, and other types of capability, other types of data. So yeah, I think it's probably north of 80% would be my guess, but it's just a guess.
Got it. Got it. No, that's helpful color. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Peter and Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks.
There are no further questions at this time. With that, I will now turn the call back over to Sir Peter Beck for final closing remarks. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. And before we close out today, there are some up-and-coming conferences that we'll be attending, shown below. We look forward to sharing more exciting news and updates with you. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. That wraps up today's call, and we look forward to speaking with you again about the exciting progress being made at Rocket Lab. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes your conference call. We thank you for participating and ask that you please disconnect your line.
Pretty wild, man. I'm not gonna lie. I liked it. I thought
Me too.
I bought more.
Me too,
I bought
baby.
more during the call. Sorry if I zoned out. And then I also ate a chip, so that's why I turned off my camera. But yeah, I bought a couple hundred shares worth. That's all the money I have right now. Like I said, money's tight for me this month, but hopefully next month we can get a little bit more. What did you guys think of the call?
I mean, fine overall. Yeah, nothing. It wasn't like revolutionary, nothing too groundbreaking, but like just all in all, just pushing in a healthy direction. Not as fast as the general market seems to want, but yeah. What do you think, Vince?
Yeah, the same. I mean, I think the thesis is going along. Like maybe the market was really hungry for, this blowout quarter, but basically they are doing what they said that they were going to do, and this few months of delay on Neutron, who gives an F? I guess, again, we built up hype that there's going to be Neutron contract announcements and, maybe something with MDA. But those were just, social media hype. And I think I'm liking the price. I'm looking at what to do. Maybe I can get out of my cover calls.
Good point. Yeah, it might be allow you to roll a little bit. Yeah, to me, I think that the whole picture is not there. While they did announce the Flatellite piece, the thing that we still haven't seen is the contract value for Kratos and how much that's going to impact the backlog. I think that's something that's going to be saved for 1Q. And then same thing with the NASA VADR contract. That wasn't in there either. And I don't remember if they've given us they said what the whole contract is worth. It's like about $1 billion, but I don't know how much of that goes to specifically Rocket Lab, because I think they're choosing 2 or 3 folks for that initial sort of phase of that. So is that 300 million? Is it 100 million, 200 million? That part I don't know. And so that's kind of what I'm curious as well. So you add Kratos, you add that, you add the 4 additional from IQPS. I don't know if that part was in the backlog as well, but at least the thing that I'm hearing and kind of happy about is we're at least staying backlog flat rather than decreasing as revenue kind of gets fed through. My only hope is the backlog continues to grow pretty expansively, because 20 launches at 8 million a piece, that's let's do some quick math. I mean, it's 160 $200 million ish a year. So just that alone, you're going to need to sign at least 20 launches plus per year to be able to offset that. And then obviously the space systems business is running at about going into this year about 500 million, I would assume, for 2025, 500 million a year. So I'm kind of curious where we end up with respect to at the end of 1Q. The thing that did give me a little bit of pause is the cash burn. Seems like it might increase, obviously, as we get closer towards Neutron. And so I am kind of curious as to, Scott, you mentioned like closer to 300 million before we kind of get a Neutron off. I think that was something that he might have noted as well before in the City Industrial Conference. So that's one thing I'm kind of giving thought to as well. But as I kind of thought, the backlog, I think, is still the big sore thumb for me. I think that you have other companies with much smaller revenue, much smaller throughput, with much larger backlogs at the moment. So fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of
I don't know.
Oh, go ahead, Vince. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as a Palantir investor, we have heard this before. I remember being on Palantir earnings calls, and they're like, their RPO or whatever is not growing, and Alex Karp came out and looked like our biggest customer is the government, and it's lumpy. And then, yeah, we all know how that ended. So I don't know, not so worried about the backlog.
And just to kind of add a bit of color to what Matt's saying, in terms of the cash burn, it is quite a bit less. This quarter, we're looking about 24 million compared to last quarter's about, kind of average over the past several quarters, about 40 million. So at this current rate, it'll look more towards the end of 2025 that we could expect that, getting below $300 million range, which would, initiate another raise. So hopefully that's pushed out a little bit further. But in terms of the bookings, so we have $102 million for launch bookings. So what that kind of infers is we had, what are they called? Aurora Tech that landed within Q4, as well as the 2 Neutron launches. So even if you were to assume that the Aurora Tech, the Electron signing was about 7.5 million, which is a little bit below average, that puts the 2 Neutrons under $50 million. About 47.3 is what I've calculated. So that would put the 4 new IQPS signings within Q4, and Space Systems bookings within the quarter would be about $50 million. So we kind of have that to look forward to, I guess. Just to add a bit of color.
If that Neutron is actually 47 or so million, is that does that upset you at all?
To a degree, well, I don't know if it's upset. Like, it's not like it's, if it was 35 or 40, I'd be like, what's going on, guys? But kind of what we were speaking about before, Matt, is like, there's no rush. Like, I think, honestly, if they push this out, you could get 55 million easy or higher for the Neutron. So, and granted, it's like, I'm sure there's a bit of that, like, that kind of bulk order discount mentality that we see with Electron, where it's like, the more that you buy, the better the deal. So not the end of the world,
Yeah. I think the thing that I'm kind of like scratching my head about is, like, to be honest, I don't think you need any at the moment contracts. Yes, it's nice to have that one from Vauder. It's nice to have the one for the confidential client. But to me, it almost seems like right now, the first launch is all R&D. Adam said that specifically on the call. I've always kind of wondered if the second launch will also be R&D. I'm not 100% certain on that. And so, like you stated, Scott, it's like, you have one launch specifically for the confidential client. I don't remember if the Vauder contract stated if it was 26 or 27 launch. But if that's the case, then technically you're fully subscribed out to 2027 if you have 2 R&D launches, right? So you have the one in 25. You're supposed to have 3 potential launches in 2026. So if you have one for the confidential client, one for NASA, one for R&D, then you're already subscribed. And like you stated, why sell for less than 55 million if you can wait?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have 2 viewpoints to add here. Is that they talk about the lumpiness, right? And to commit yourself to a multi-launch agreement on Neutron is a much tougher and longer sale than just getting a one or 2 Electron sale. And here's a little bit of conspiracy theory. So they debuted the Flatellite thing, and we know from Sir Peter Beck that they don't really do things if it's not for a customer, or that they're not like learning for it, or it's like, how do you call it? He has a very big business brain. So my question is, do you guys think that they're working with customers on a like, if there's a deal in the making with a this would be a question to actually ask them, like, when you debuted this Flatellite, like, do you have an interested customer that you designed it after, or how did it come about?
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet this is more on Rocket Lab's terms, personally.
I mean, I'd be willing to bet that there was a like it's two birds with one stone, right? Like they needed their own satellite for their future, but I think that they're speaking with customers that they would offer this service to, and then that way they can basically do the R&D on their own satellite on the customer's dime, and then when it's time to make their own satellites, it's already like the production is scaled up, you know, everything is known, tried and tested. That would be very Rocket Lab to do it that way.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is what we see on the debut launch. They keep mentioning like no customer payload, and they're very, you know, they've never said, to my knowledge, they've never said no payload. Yeah, they've always said no customer payload. So I'm willing to bet it's kind of what we saw with Blue Origin's Blue Ring, where it's just you launch it up and it fails, not the end of the world. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. Did you guys see that the operational cash flow or cash flow from operations was minus 2-point-something million, which is practically almost zero, like meaning they're almost cash flow positive from operations?
Interesting. No, I haven't got that far yet.
Yeah, I can go to that slide.
Yeah,
it's
that really hit me.
This 2.4.
I think that's a very, very bullish sign.
Yeah. It goes to show you that the actual OpEx spend here is really what's driving this cash burn rather than the actual
CapEx, no?
Yeah, CapEx. Well, I guess CapEx wouldn't. Would R&D be considered OpEx or CapEx?
I think it depends.
I'd have to look. My brain's not working right now, but
because the OpEx would be like it would make the operational, like the cash flow from operation negative, right? If it would be.
This is purchase of property. Yeah, so this would be the red would be CapEx. You're right. Yeah, but in terms of free cash, you're right. It's only really this piece. So I'm trying to understand what the difference between cash flow from operations, what's included in this non-GAAP, then what would be the difference in the EBITDA, and why would be a difference between 20 million or so?
The GAAP and non-GAAP? Sorry, what was your question? Why would there be a difference?
Why would you be running at a negative 23 million, but only 2.4 in terms of free cash? I'm trying to understand.
Okay. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and I don't know what the A is now. I forgot. I'm too tired.
Amortization. Yeah.
Exactly. And the non-GAAP free cash flow. I mean, I think there are two different metrics, right? Because the non-GAAP cash flow from operations is only looking at like purely like we launched an Electron. This is how much it cost. This is what we paid to the employees, and then this was the income, right? And then I think the adjusted EBITDA also looks at like the CapEx, I think, but not the SBC.
Yeah, it doesn't account for SBC.
Anyways, the fact that they are almost cash flow positive from operations for me is a very, very bullish sign.
Yeah, it goes to show that they're not pulling numbers out of their butt, right? They're actually from an actual business perspective, without Neutron, very close to being a profitable business. And so a lot of people have been questioning, how profitable is the underlying business? Well, this goes to show you from cash flow in versus cash flow out, excluding Neutron, which is most of this red piece, I assume. you're getting close to that 0 mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see specifically. I think that would honestly make the market jump a little bit. Is if you were to strip out Neutron, what do these numbers look like? And I think people would be very surprised, and it actually might. To be very fair, I just saw this recently with Dutch Bros, another company I invest in. Big catalysts for price movements in the stock are obviously things like Neutron, actual launches, stuff like that. And then there's also a piece around being EBITDA positive. So that's a piece. And then free cash flow positive, specifically for things like high CapEx businesses where you're consistently investing back into the business. It's one thing to be EBITDA positive, right? That means your cost of goods sold is less than your gross profit, SGA drag, etc. So basically overcoming all your cost of goods sold and your cost to keep the business alive on a day-to-day basis. And then there's the piece where you're actually net income positive, right? So to me, I view this as two upcoming catalysts, and I have viewed this way for a long time. Neutron obviously getting off the ground, because that means you're over a hump of massive CapEx expenditure in terms of R&D, and you can actually start returning on investment, hence the name return on investment bar, which I thought was very clever and funny. And then as you get into the first half of 2026, you start to take in, especially with the customers for Neutron, start to take in some of the revenue, recognize sure. That's when you start to get the profitable piece. Coupled with the space systems and hopefully Electron cadence picking up. Yeah, that's kind of the hope. And once you see that, once they can demonstrate that this black part is actually positive and not negative, I'm sure there's going to be a big jump in the stock. So I wouldn't be surprised if in 1Q, maybe not 1Q because the revenue is going back down again, but in 2Q, if we have a very positive earnings report, let's just say it's at 145 or 150 million, and this black actually shows up as positive, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a large jump in the stock.
So why do you think that the stock is reacting so bad?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm kind of surprised it's reacting this poorly because of basically the breaking down of that whole Bleecker report, even the little cheeky little digs that Peter made about actually having water on site and whatnot, and I can't remember the other talking point, but it was basically I think that they were saying that there was Neutron in 2027. So they've basically I don't know. I'm kind of surprised it's reacting this poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I did some numbers in my article. We ran from the lowest point, right? If you were to time it perfectly to the peak, 800% in terms of total run. We've obviously pulled back now pretty expansively, so we're still up. If the people are kind of keeping track, about 325% from that. From that, not perfect timing of the low, but about $4. So potential for potentially higher return if you time the bottom, but still massively up. My thought process was, I did think the $30 range was expansive, but at the same time, you don't know when a lot of these contracts, let's just say they came up with the Iron Dome contracts within the next 6 months. Let's just say they came up with a whole laundry list of constellations from the SDA, not only
NSSL,
the not just the SDA satellite creations, but also now the launch in 2028, 2029. Now you're starting to see the backlog increase and the viability of this business truly take off to be something where you can anticipate in 2027 the 1.25 billion that people have forecasted for revenue generation. So to me, if you look at it today, you look at it from a fiscal year 24, it doesn't look good, right? I'll just be point blank. When you were looking at it yesterday, when the price was around $21, it was $10.5 to $11 billion market cap. for the company, and you're sitting here generating $430 million, the price to sales on that is very expensive. But then you start to recognize that it's going to be 650 million in the next 12 months for fiscal year 24. You're like, okay, it's still 17 times price to sales. And it really doesn't only start to get cheap, and now it's even cheaper because the price dipped below 20. But yesterday when I was at $21, it was like, okay, 2027, you're looking at 8x price to sales. That's when you'd start to be like, that's starting to get a little cheapish, right? Considering this is a high growth business, what the future catalysts look like, the high moat associated with it. Is it dirt cheap? No. But we're kind of in this period and lull where we're about to start entering what shows up as a very large tailwind, in my opinion. And I think, to me, it's a point where we've taken a retracement. I get that. I still think that the price could come down. I think it easily can come back down to $10, $11 if the market kind of gives it the reason to, and the macroeconomic environment doesn't really change to more risk on. But at the same time, you don't know, right? And so I see a lot of people in the chat saying, I'll wait till 15, I'll wait till 10. You don't know. The market could turn around tomorrow, or it couldn't, But somebody asked why I didn't wait until tomorrow to buy. I bought at $17, and I guess it was like 40 cents or something like that. I'm happy with that number. I'm not going to be kicking myself being like, oh, woulda, coulda, shoulda, because let's just be honest. To me, this report was great. Was it grand? No, grand would have been, had they gave me the backlog numbers with Kratos and stuff of the like. They've done that in the past, which is they gave the quarter end number and what it is to date. I was updating my spreadsheets yesterday when I was writing my article, or maybe it's 2 nights ago, and they have provided that in the past. I think that would have been nice to be able to see what it looked like kind of mid 1Q, because I feel like the majority of the volume that they're going to get for 1Q has already kind of been baked in. We're a month out, and I don't really see them coming up with any big contracts between now and the end of March, but I could be wrong as well. So
one other thing that I'll point out, just something that I had on my radar leading into this report, and I may need to eat my tinfoil hat over this. So in terms of the reaction wheels, I kept mentioning that, like, I think the magic number was like if the 12 NMS reaction wheels were being sold for $22,000 a piece or higher, we'd see it on this report. And that's why I was under the assumption we were going to see Amazon announced like now. We do have a mention of all it says is government customer as being one of the customers within 2024 that is over 11% of revenue. This is the first mention that we've had of this alleged customer. And if you were to kind of put that into, like, kind of say this a different way, is the reaction wheels would be selling for $24,000 a piece, give or take. So this very well could be our reaction wheel customer. And the fact, well, I shouldn't say the fact, I guess probability or the potential that this is not Amazon is like quite surprising to me. So yeah, might have to go back on my word on that one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you're saying that the 5 nanometers might not be Amazon? I'm confused.
No, so the 5 is the new one that was just kind of popped up on their site somewhere in like between the second half of December, first half of January. And that one's based on the learnings from the 12 NMS wheel. The 12 is the high volume wheel that had 2,000 delivered to a customer last year. And so you just simply, it would have to be anything higher than like $22,000, just multiplying that by the 2,000 reaction wheels within the year. Anything over that $22,000 per reaction wheel would kind of have to out that customer. So I was kind of expecting something to be on the 10K, whether it would be like, even in the past, they've mentioned like confidential customer G, confidential customer H, or what have you. But the only customers that are listed as 10% of revenue or higher customers is MDA, which is no surprise. Northrop, but that's actually from 2023. It's still shows the year before, but the new one for 2024 is government customer, listed as 11% of revenue. So, 48 million of 2024's revenue was towards a government customer. So that's probably our reaction wheel client, I guess. But yeah, nothing confirmed still. But
I wonder who it would be.
All right, guys. It's soon 1:00 here. I'm super tired, so I'm going to go. But thank you so much for having me on the stream.
Yeah.
You bet, man. Good to have you.
Yeah, and I'll see you guys around.
Yeah, man.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Scott, I'm not sure how much additional you wanted to add. I think, personally, I'm a little bit flabbergasted by the price going down. Am I surprised? Not really. Flabbergasted is probably the wrong word. Am I surprised? A little bit. Am I confused? No. We're down here at $16.80 after hours. Overall, down about 23% on the day. I'm perfectly okay with it. My hope, though, is that it doesn't just stick here and like turn around tomorrow. I would love it to stay here, but I have a strong feeling that the rest of the market is going to do a pivot here within the next week. And unfortunately, I might not be able to get the price that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Are you waiting? Do you have money to buy? Curious.
I mean, yeah. Like I don't know. I have the 3-day rule, so I'm not gonna rush out and buy tomorrow right away. But I'll probably start considering, I guess, Monday, like next week, I guess, and see kind of where the price is at. I regularly add and trim positions, just kind of if they get a little bit overweight. And Rocket Lab is one of those, so I trimmed it I've trimmed here and there, but I'll probably buy back what I trimmed at like 28. Honestly, if it's even relatively close to 15, I'll probably be a buyer next week again. But with all the tariff talk, and there's still a lot of turbulence, so to speak, and
right.
I don't know, there's still plenty of opportunity in the market, and I wouldn't be too upset if it jumps right back up. I wouldn't be upset either way, though. Like, plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, I think I originally had buys set up for Monday. Normally, I have it set for the 15th on the last day of the month. Unfortunately for me, the February is a short month, so I think it jumped to Monday, which is March 3rd, I believe. So I'm gonna have to go through in some of my automatic investments and see if I can switch it to tomorrow. I don't know. I understand why you do the 3-day rule. Generally speaking, what ends up happening, earnings reports come out, people will either write up or write down the stock depending on what the earnings report kind of stated. I'd find it hard to see if people write down the stock, but people started moving their price targets to the 30s. So maybe people would potentially bring it down to the low to mid 20s again. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised. You see it all the time. It just seems like the analysts are more or less just trying to keep up with the share price than actually, putting out a price target that they actually think is going to happen in a year.
All right. People asking specifically about net cash on hand. I don't know about net cash, but they did provide guidance specifically around how much total cash they still have. So they have 484 million in cash and equivalents. I don't know how much debt. I know they have some obligations and liabilities associated with the capped calls, which might have already been accounted for and paid for. But yes, in terms of net debt, I don't know if you have the 10Q or 10K open. 10Q,
I have net debt. It's down a couple million since last quarter, where it's 56 million. And that might, the way that I calculate that, if you will, it's current installments of long-term borrowings and long-term borrowings excluding current installments. So in simple terms, it just combines the two. You find them in, I'm drawing a blank, in the balance sheet, in the current assets and total assets, what I'm looking for. So
I I don't necessarily know that you need to cap raise at 300 million. If I was the team and you are getting close to cash flow break even, you have 184 million that you can spend prior to that kind of 300 mark. And while you need some working capital, I don't think that these guys are, especially after they get a Neutron launch, I don't think that it'll be hard pressed for them to raise capital. And if I was them, I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm a gambling man, but I am kind of a gambling man. Knowing the cash burn, knowing how much money it's going to take them to get the first Neutron off, and being fairly confident that they've done this before. They were rather successful in the first launch of Electron. They've launched 60 vehicles now, and now they're doing it for a medium launch. I wouldn't cap raise prior to launching a Neutron, or not even cap raise, but just raise debt or anything prior to getting a Neutron. You're going to get much more favorable terms, I feel, even if it's a couple percentage points or 1 percentage point. I feel like you're going to get much more favorable terms if you have a successful medium launch vehicle and small launch vehicle and hypersonic vehicle than still not having a proven medium launch vehicle. I think people might view that as a risk. People might view that as a drag on future cash burns. But if you have a now vehicle that is certified and able to take up commercial customers, that to me is room for better opportunity. And I don't necessarily know if you'll need cash in the next year or so once it starts to become break even from an EBITDA perspective. Hopefully, you get to a point where you're starting to generate slow bits of cash, and this 400 million might arrest, and you might be stuck at about, let's say, 300 to 350 million for a year or so. But once you start getting the cash flow in the door, I'm sure once you start getting revenues in 2027 of 1.25 billion, is kind of the thought process. Then you might start actually adding to the balance sheet rather than burning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only way I see them really needing capital like sooner than later is if we do see some sort of really meaty acquisition. But
yeah.
I mean, everything feels kind of really like hit or miss. I mean, you've got the overall space industry is pretty hot right now, but then you do have I keep pointing at Mynaric as one potential option. Maybe not with that whole restructuring, but you do see some of those here and there, and wouldn't be surprised if we get a couple tuck-ins maybe in the next year or so.
Yeah. Seeing some people say, potential for acquisitions, legal for acquisitions by Hot Curtis. Yeah, I don't know. Everything. I didn't think that personally they would raise money early last year either, and here I am kind of eating my hat with that. So you never know. Yeah, you really don't know. Interesting. Well, I don't really have much more. I'm curious for when my article comes out. I'll keep people apprised on X if you haven't followed me yet. But for anybody that hasn't followed Scotto, please check out my description. And let me get his channel as well. Scott's a good friend of the channel. We do Rocket Lab Weekly together, and he's way more detailed than I am. I'd say he's just better overall with respect to getting charts and graphics out there. He just put a post up on X as well. That was really well detailed with some good graphics, specifically highlighting the difference between space systems and launch. And overall, he's a good man with respect to that stuff because I'm too lazy generally. But yeah, any last thoughts?
No, I mean, not a blowout earnings, but I don't think it was a bad earnings either. I think it's just more or less kind of to hold us over for the time being. But I mean, nothing devastating, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is the bad part. When I say like nothing mind blowing, it's like to be very frank, like everything that Rocket Lab does has been mind blowing, but that's par for the course. And so to me, it's like, okay, they introduced the Constellation Flatellite. They have this ongoing record breaking medium launch vehicle that's going to get to the pad within record timing for a medium launch vehicle. Like, I just have such a high accord for execution ability and such a high esteem for those guys on the ground at Rocket Lab that a okay to good quarter is still light years ahead of most other companies. And so I just want people to hear in the call, like, just because I say okay to good doesn't mean that the company's not performing. The company's performing to me as expected. Am I kind of upset that they noted that there might be a couple month slip from mid-year to kind of, let's say, August or September timeframe in terms of launch? That's kind of my gut feel. That's what we talked about a week or a couple weeks or a month ago on Vince's Rocket Lab Weekly. So I'm not too surprised by that. I was expecting that, just noting the long list of milestones they needed to accomplish. But at the same time, it's still record-breaking pace for a rocket program. And to me, I'd rather them tweak things and get it right the first time. So that way, when they get it, they build the third, fourth, fifth Neutron, they're up to snuff. But anyway, I hope people aren't sitting here being like, this was a bad quarter. Like, I don't understand how someone can interpret that. I don't understand how the stock price interprets it unless they're just looking at the headline numbers. The future, in my opinion, of this company is still extremely bullish. I'm just as convicted. I'm not shaking whatsoever. I'm not scared whatsoever. And we've lost 45% on the share price. I'm just as convicted now as I was when it was $31, $32. I bought more. I'm upset I don't have more cash. I'm thinking about, and one of the things I've always thought about with my S&P 500 investment is I would always use it almost as a bank. So if I needed to sell shares in it to buy other things that I think are great value, I would. But for that, I think I might be with you. I had something that I wanted to trim a little bit. I did that after hours. I bought a couple hundred shares. What I will likely do, wait a couple days, hopefully. I still have an automatic buy tomorrow because I get paid tomorrow. So anyway, what's the word I was looking for? Might take some opportunity to trim some SPY and put it into there because obviously the SPY has held up rather well comparatively to Rocket Lab. But yeah, I'm flabbergasted that I think it's more macroeconomic reasons why the stock is down than anything. And I'm still excited. Like, I don't have any. The only time I sell stocks, for anybody that's listening, I sell stocks if the theory has changed, if I feel like I'm being misguided or misled, there's a pivot in the underlying performance of the company, or there's a pivot in the strategy of the company that I no longer agree with. And yes, the stock might be down 45%, but I still don't feel like they're missing the mark from what they've set out and what they've stated to me. I've always known that I was okay, even if the Neutron launch got pushed into 26. It's a rocket program. So for me, way above par for the course for these guys. And to me, that shows up as okay to a good quarter because I have that esteem for these guys. So sorry I went on a little monologue, but
No, I mean, as well said. I don't have too much else to add. I mean, you and I think we see things slightly bit different in just terms that I trim every now and then, whereas you just kind of lock it in and let it ride. But I mean, obviously not financial advice to anybody, but if you've been waiting for a Rocket Lab dip, here it is.
There is one, yeah. 100%. Yeah, and it, just so everyone's aware, I don't look at Scott trimming as a bad thing. I think you got to do what's right for your portfolio. The way I look at this is I want Rocket Lab to be one of my biggest, if not the biggest size position in my portfolio. And I hope to borrow against it. You know, if I need to go to the Maldives or something, like, you know, go visit or go, you know, purchase something, I could say, look, you know, I have shares of this, you know, $100 to $200 billion company and use it as leverage to buy something, and over time pay myself back whatever that is through cash flows or whatever I buy or whatever. To me, I don't view selling as an option unless the thought process changed. Now, let's just say Rocket Lab goes to a $100 billion market cap tomorrow. Yes, I'm selling, right? Like, because I would be fearful that with where we're at in the company's journey, that it could pull down or retrace. But until we got north of probably $25-30 billion, about $25 billion or $30 billion, it wouldn't cross my mind. So that's not to say what I'm doing is right. You got to do what's right for your portfolio. Nobody's going to hurt you for trimming if you think it's going to go down and you're up 325% still. And nobody's going to hurt or wait or make fun of you if you say, I need to wait until I see cash flow break even. Everyone has their own criteria. So
Matty, how low do you think we go over the quarter?
For Rocket Lab,
I
wouldn't be surprised if we get back to $12 or $14, man. I really wouldn't. In fact, I honestly hope it does.
Yeah.
Because I had every month. I had twice a month at a minimum. And I get my bonus next month. So my bonus, I was going to pay myself back for buying the house that I'm buying, closing on March 10th or 11th. I forget what day. I should find out because I have to be there. But I was going to pay myself back. But if, paying myself back versus buying Rocket Lab at, in my opinion, a 50% discount, I would rather buy Rocket Lab at a 50% discount. But I just have to get to March 15th.
Okay.
So hopefully the next 3 weeks stay at $16 or less. That'd be the hope.
Sweet. Yeah, not unreasonable to hope for. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not hoping it stays for months. Just 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Cool. You're the man, dude. I appreciate you stopping in. Vince hates us, so he showed up late. Disrespectful.
Really unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. These damn Europeans. No, I'm just kidding. At least we have our Canadian friends, as much as Trump is trying to get us to hate each other.
No, we're good.
Yeah, we're good. But no, man, I really appreciate it. I love your insights always, man. You do a phenomenal job. If you guys haven't followed, actually, I should put your axe on here as well. I just had it. Here's your actual post. I encourage everybody to read this post. I was reading it during the conference call. Scott did a really good breakdown of all the numbers in the background. So I encourage everybody to go look at it. Hey, man, I saw that you obviously do a lot of space videos. Before we sign off, you do Rocket Lab. What other companies do you do for the couple hundred people that are still here and you can advertise for?
I mean, generally it's Rocket Lab. The last one I did was it was kind of talking about Rocket Lab's latest launch with Black Sky and kind of what that is ultimately going to usher in, and kind of comparing Black Sky to Planet Labs. And I mean, I cover a number of different space companies, Redwire as well, and then a few different industries. So a couple stocks that I follow quite closely is like Shift4, High Tide, EOS Energy. So I'm kind of mostly known for space stocks, but it's like you probably relate, Matt. You're kind of like Palantir, Rocket Lab, and anything else that it's a little bit. You don't get quite as many, viewers for what you pull, right? So
yeah,
but yeah, it's I'm definitely a huge numbers nerd. So
you do a good job with it. Dave wanted to do his own thing. Check out Dave. I'm sure he's got some good insights as well. I'm curious. I think he was starting around the same time we were, so he probably did comparable. Probably looked at the presentation, gave his thoughts, and then I'm sure after the presentation, he went offline about 20 minutes ago. So I'm sure you can look up the last 15-20 minutes of what he said, and it probably has a lot to do with what he thinks about the earnings. But you're the man, Scott.
Got great insights. Yeah, love Dave.
Yeah, Dave's great. Another good Canadian. We like some. We like some of our Canadians. Some of them. No, I'm just kidding. I follow good Canadians, man. You, Dave, Tevis, Tanner. I'm sure there's a few others there. Kelly is a good person, but she doesn't really do YouTube as much as anymore. But yeah, you guys are phenomenal. But you're the man, dude. If I don't talk to you between now and Saturday, hopefully you can make it. We'll see you for Rocket Lab Weekly.
Okay, sounds good, Matty. Look forward
Thanks,
to it.
everybody. Looking forward to hopefully the stock staying down a little bit so I can buy more. Cheers, all.